It was really just applying everything that I'd learned, handling the logistics, learning how to take constructive criticism and not have a chip on my shoulder. I felt like this is what I'm trying to do. This is what I know Jesus was about. If you're not like that, then you can get out of my way and watch me help somebody.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 68, The Shot in the Dark, featuring Pastor Sean Barron. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. Well, it's 2020, a new year, and I'm starting it off with a new episode of Find the Good News. You may know that I took the month of December off from production, but that didn't stop me from having some really great conversations with people doing good works in the world. This episode features Pastor Sean Barron of Freedom Ministry of the South. Sean and I had instant rapport, and I get the feeling he connects with a lot of people that way. I suspect it's because he knows how to love people where they're at. I think you'll enjoy all the rabbit trails we take in our conversation. I know I did. In 2 weeks, I'll be sharing my conversation with Beth Fields Bunch, founder of Almost Home Ministries, which offers hope to people in our community struggling to rise above many of the calamities caused by addiction. Then, in the following weeks, I'll post my conversation with Shaquila Solomon, a local educator that brought her passion for teaching and love for children to Nigeria. Find the Good News seems to have found its stride. Sharing these stories of good people doing good works is something I believe in. If you want to help me on this mission, visit patreon.com/findthegoodnews. For $3.33 a month, you'll continue to enjoy this podcast while helping me send some desperately needed positivity into the world. You'll get access to the patrons-only podcast called The B-Sides, where you'll meet the rest of the Good News team. That link is patreon.com/findthegoodnews. patreon.com/findthegoodnews. Now, it's time once again to open our minds to the stories of another human being, to seek out the things that bind us instead of focusing on the issues that grind us. Today, we remember the pains of the past, but hold out hope for a more peaceful future. Let's start the new year with joy and gladness and press play on a little good news. Most of my conversations on Find the Good News start off right at the round table. In the case of Pastor Sean Barron, I got to have a long friendly chat with him the night before we recorded. I usually get to see each guest as they walk up to the studio door. With Sean, I walked right up to him as he was coming in, and what a joyous greeting he provided. He offered a genuine smile, a hug, and one of my favorite gifts to receive, the gift of common ground. Sean shared happy memories with me of his youth spent scouring the shelves of my daddy's local video and gaming store, Bo's Videos. I think fondly on those times in the 80s and 90s, and it was clear to me that Sean does as well. In my case, and I think perhaps in Sean's, those times hold high value because they were before the troubles. You know the troubles. We each have them in our lives, to one varying degree or another. Depending on the ever-changing variety of circumstances in life, the troubles could be little speed bumps or they could be tire-shredding potholes. In Pastor Sean's case, the troubles came, and they came again and again. These troubles became the very ground on which Sean's salvation was built, the tilled earth that gave our region the Christian Recovery Program and Freedom Ministry of the South. He said something to me in our conversation that stood out, partly because it was familiar, and mostly because it was powerful. My name is Sean, and my life has become unmanageable. Maybe you've said some version of this, or perhaps you're on your way there. Wherever you're at, whatever your troubles, however unlovable you feel you are, Sean Barron and the Freedom Ministry of the South is there to give you the gift of common ground. You haven't fallen anywhere that they haven't fallen to. Because they've been shredded in the same potholes, they know how to change a tire and get you back on a better path. Sean has been there himself, and he knows the way out is through loving and compassionate Christian accompaniment. His message is one of falling down, getting up, redemption, love, transformation, and hope. This is my conversation with Pastor Sean Barron.
Wake up this morning, You're dreaming up a story, I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep on the path to your deliverance, and a holy wall of light pouring through your window.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you just want to shut it all down and get no news at all. With Find the Good News, I aim to change that by focusing on good people doing good work. I visit with artists, educators, civic and spiritual leaders, musicians, business owners, students, volunteers, and everyday citizens who are using their creativity, resources, and talents to bring hope and happiness to their corner of the world. In each episode, I dig into the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have street-level conversations about relatable things going on in their lives. Discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that are anchoring them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of news in the world. My name is Oran Parker, and I'm going to find the good.
And I love you just as well.
I think it's interesting when you walked in, that was kind of a shock to me. You were like, hey, the first thing you said was your dad had Bo's videos, and you started talking about that. And I always find that's comforting to me, man.
It was comforting. It was a great part of my childhood.
Yeah.
You know, it really was. You know, you get your mongoose bike with the pegs, and then, you know, get with your little buddies and then ride down to Bo's videos and hope that you could get the Tecmo Bowl 1991 version.
God, it brings back so many memories, man. That's all right. Hey, man, we leave that stuff in. That's the spice.
Yeah.
No, I remember those days, man. I mean, and it's funny you say that. You ride your mongoose, man. I remember I went to LeBlanc Middle School. Where did you go to junior high here?
W.W. Lewis.
W.W. Lewis, okay. Well, I remember, man, whenever it was like doing stunts on bikes was like a huge thing, you know. That was kind of new, honestly, back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, around here anyway.
Yeah. And Tony Hawk was brand new.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
God, man, that was junior high for me. A bunch of my friends were into that, and we just all sit around and watch them. And then, of course, skateboarding kind of got really popular, and there was a lot of kids skating around here.
Yeah.
You know, so that was nothing, you know, on the weekend working at the video store to have a bunch of bikes laying outside. You know what I mean? Like that was it. I mean, it was all bikes just at the video store, going in there, like you said, looking for that. Dad had those little plastic tags. They were like little circles with a hole, and that was how he rented those out of the video games. He would have the box on the shelf and a little hook.
Yeah, or the movies used to be the empty.
The empty box.
Yeah. And why I personally loved it so much is, you know, I am a wrestling fan. Not near as active as I was when I was younger, but my dad didn't take me hunting or fishing or whatever, so we went to Mid-South Professional Wrestling and stuff like that at the Lake Charles Civic Center. He enjoyed the cultural experience of it all.
Really?
And Bo's videos you could go rent WrestleMania 1, like they had the archived before pay-per-view was, you know, such a big deal.
Yeah. God, dude, that's funny. I remember that too. When I was a kid, I was a Mid-South wrestling fan as well. I loved it when I was a little boy. And my aunt one time took me, when it came to the Civic Center, she took me to it, and man, I screamed. I used to see those people when I was a kid. I was like, man, they're freaking out. And she took me to that, and I came home, I'd lost my voice. I screamed so much. It was the Rock and Roll Express. And the Rock and Roll Express came out, and who was the guy? Who were they fighting, man? He had a football helmet that he would bring out.
Probably Dr. Death, Steve Williams.
Dr. Death, Steve Williams. Yes, man, that's who it was. And he was the bad guy.
Yep.
And they were the good guys. And I remember sitting in that little chair. My aunt, she didn't say anything. I know she was smiling the whole time, though. I was standing up in that chair because he of course knocked him down or whatever, and he was going to get that helmet to hit him with it. And I was screaming my lungs out.
Yeah, I encourage anybody. I mean, they sort of push it more extremes to try to stay relevant and controversial, but it's a cultural experience if nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's theater.
Yeah, it is theater. God, man, I didn't expect we were going to get to talk about anything like this. It's always neat. That's what I always, I don't know how you feel coming into an interview or a podcast or anything like that, or even speaking. Okay, let's talk about that. We were kind of chatting about that before we started recording. Public speaking, it's like, for me, I always have all these, I'm going to call them fantasies. They're like a whole slew of micro fantasies about what's going to happen as soon as I get on the stage, or I get behind the microphone, or I get in front of the people. And they're really these anxiety building, some of them are potentially ways things could go wrong. Some of them are potentially ways things could go right. Some of them are things that I'm worried that I'm going to forget. And it all just sort of like escalates. And then when I get up there and start, just like this podcast, it's like, okay, hey, it is what it is. If I forget something, that's okay.
Yeah, that's one of the age-old things that every time I step down, that I'll think, well, you should have said this, you should have said that. And I'm fortunate now that a lot of times before I speak, there'll be worship music playing. You know what I mean? So yeah. I can be concentrating, leaning in, praying, whatever. But to get where I am now, I just had to. I believe that I can learn how to enjoy the moment more. Because sometimes, for example, on a Friday night before it's time for the service to begin, I'm bouncing around. I'm trying to engage in conversation with people because I am glad they're there. I'm trying to focus on the new faces. Well, some other people want me to talk to them, but really, it's just go time. And I just want everything to be perfect. I want everything to be in place, and I want to be able to just capture what's happening in the moment.
Yeah.
Although I'm always prepared on the inside about what I may or may not say. But often it doesn't come out like what I envisioned it to. Yeah. But the preparation is never wasted, because that might come out in a personal conversation.
Don't you kind of love that, though? I mean, and on one hand, there's the that sometimes it's those mistakes or the forgetting of something, or something not coming out the way that maybe you intended it to, way off the path of the preparation, and you end up in this sort of tributary that takes you off into a path. You go, wow, I hadn't went down this train of thinking before. I haven't allowed myself to go there because I created this sort of structure, but now because whatever caused me to maybe hiccup right here, now I'm off on this little side path, but now I'm thinking about something differently, or looking at it a new way, or you're finding new words, and you end up developing almost like a whole, a whole new little node of wisdom that you can share, maybe.
Well, we call it rabbits. You know what I mean?
Okay,
and
yeah.
So, but the thing is if you're in tune with God whenever you're speaking, that the rabbit might not be like Jesus went after the one and left the 99. Sometimes, that is not for everybody else.
That's right.
Necessarily.
Right.
And so the difference is, and the challenge is for me, is to not do that out of my flesh, out of my soul, out of what I want to say.
Yeah.
That I'm prepared, so I don't have that even bouncing around in my mind. But if I'm up there and the message is about spiritual warfare, and I end up telling a story about my dad or whatever,
right?
And then, for example, I was in Mexico preaching a conference that was related to spiritual warfare, and I was the keynote speaker, which was new to me. And so I was in this, we were in 3 different venues, so it was the Saturday night venue, and I took off telling a story about losing my dad in 2014, and I started tearing up and getting emotional. And even as I was saying that to the people, I'm on the inside, I'm talking to myself like, what are you talking about this right now? You got this, you had this that you were supposed to say. This has nothing to do. You're supposed to be, giving the people of Mexico the tools that they need. And so I shared that story, and I put an exclamation mark on it, and then I transitioned from that into, making all your days count and tying it into the message about what I was saying. And still, I didn't know. But when it was over, that a man came to me broken, that he had just lost his father like less than a month ago. So the wounds for him were extraordinarily fresh.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, which I'm a grown up now, I've been doing this for a while, I don't have to have that confirmation, but it sure is nice when you get it, you know, and you're like, okay, that's why I was talking about that. Man,
that is a powerful thing. And I know we haven't even really got to describing what you do, but I mean, I feel like I want to share this because I had a ministry that I'd started, I guess a little over 2 years ago, and it was basically just a prayer meeting in a park. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what it was. But it was kind of and the truth be known, I really started that because I felt like there were people out there that were a little disenfranchised. They just didn't maybe feel like they fit where they were maybe going to church, or maybe they'd been shunned a little bit at church because we're real good at that. And maybe they didn't feel comfortable. Maybe their sins have been put on blast. For whatever reason, they were disenfranchised. And I said, I want to create something in a park that is for those people. And so it went on for a year. And actually, I'm about to just saying this out loud, putting it out in the ether here, is that I'm actually about to kick it off again. But I needed a year away from it to really pray about it and think about it really hard and honestly assess what was my own will versus what was I being really led to do with it. But I'm saying all that because what I discovered through that was exactly what you just described. Is there would be Saturdays when I would go out there, and I would have had three experiences of 3 weeks between each one. Somewhere in that 3 weeks, something would happen, and so when I would get to that prayer meeting, I would talk about it. But every time there were new people showing up, different faces, I wouldn't know who they were. And many, many times what I would share would be relevant specifically, not maybe to the full group. There might be like that overall, I guess, feeling that people get from what you're saying, but there would always be that one person at the end who would go, hey, that was for me because this is what's been going on in my life. And so we would connect one-on-one, and I was like, man, isn't that great that those rabbits, I like that those rabbits will go off into the thicket.
Yeah, and that's the challenge to make sure, because I've done that, as a minister. For example, there was a situation where a lot of people were gossiping, and what I do, that's totally unacceptable. You know what I mean? Because people are trying to change, and so I got this notion. So I got into my Bible, I started reading, found all these in the Proverbs about you shouldn't gossip and and deal with the speck in your the log in your own eye, not the speck in your brother's eye.
Yeah.
And so I had this phenomenal message about gossip and the words that you speak and all this other stuff. And there was about 7 or 8 people on both sides and on the outskirts of this situation that I'm talking about. And listen, that Friday night, none of those people showed up. And so that's one of the things where I felt like, the Lord set me down and said, look, you can't change people. You know what I mean? You need to say what I'm telling you to say, and not try to do that anymore. You know, because sometimes it's easier to try to say it from the front or from the pulpit or whatever instead of just having a one-on-one conversation with people. Because that's almost so unacceptable and fearful in this modern era. But it's actually, you'll never grow as a person if you don't have accountability and people that can speak into your life.
It's funny, there's this picture I've had in my mind for years. I've never shared it with anybody, but as you're talking now, it just kind of, I guess it's like an imagination exercise, and for me it says a lot visually. But I've always envisioned this really big sort of mega congregation, and then you have a pastor up at the pulpit in a nice suit, and there's lights, and everything's, beautiful acrylic everywhere, and it's just glittering, and everybody's standing up with their hands in the air. I'm not belittling that, but I'm just saying, that's the scene I'm setting in my mind. And while everybody's standing and there's all this glory and all the hands are up facing the pulpit, the Lord's out there on his knees, crawling around the floor, washing everybody's feet. You can't see him. And for me, that picture reminds me so much that there's real work to be done. The things we see, the standing ovation, isn't always what is really going on, and somebody's down on the ground in those thickets, in those rabbit holes, doing that work. And that always gets my head in the space I need to be in, because I can do that too. We can all do it, because when you're out front, because like even this show, you and I were kind of chatting last night, and people don't realize that we talked on the phone for about 30 minutes last night, and after we got off the phone, I didn't have much time to reflect because we had our evening going on. But when I was laying in bed last night, I was thinking about being out front. And I don't really love being out front. But I'll put myself out front. And I find myself doing that over and over again. I'm like, for somebody who doesn't like to be out front, why in the world do I put myself out front? And I realized last night after talking to you, is like, there's just something to be done, and somebody has to.
That's right.
And I guess that's it. That's just as simple as that.
Yeah, and I believe in what I'm saying and what I'm doing. I just like I've shared with you a couple of times that I loathe self-promotion.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I do have people that are helping me with the media in the ministry and stuff like that now. But I just, as a matter of fact, one of the verses on the app that came up in the last 2 days says, don't let the right hand know what the left one is doing.
Yeah.
But while it has to be put out there, you know what I mean? We were talking about that there are a lot of good people out there that want to do something good, and they just don't know what that's going to look like. They're nervous about it, or they don't know where they can sign up or how they can participate in it. And so that's, to me, it has to get out there to some extent. But I sure don't want to document everything I do good on Facebook, for example. I'm not going to do it. I don't have time for it. If somebody wants to take a picture of me doing it for the cause of the ministry, not for exploitation, then get after it. Because at the end of the day, I have to believe that what I'm doing is worth it, or I would have quit a long time ago.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. This is great. I'm feeling good right now, man. Got good energy going on in the conversation. I think what you just said is a great segue in for people to find out what it is you do. Because I'll tell you, like I've told other guests who've been on here, you're one of the people that's been suggested to come on this show by several people. They've reached out to me and said, hey, there's a guy doing this work, and some of them have even shared some of their testimony with me about how you affected their life. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, no.
Because that's their private stuff that they sent. But, it's one thing for somebody to go, hey, this guy's name is this, and this is what he does. But for people to go, hey, this person here's how this person changed my life. I was like, okay, I gotta get him to come in here and talk to me, because that's exactly what this show's about. So hearing that,
okay,
is that a good segue for you to tell us?
It is, and I'll just put this out there, that everything we do, you can find it at freedom337.org. But I want to switch back into where it comes from, what Freedom Ministry of the South is all about. Because it wasn't much longer, after I was riding my bicycle to Bo's videos that I ended up, getting involved in the drug culture.
Okay.
And my family experienced losses. And, when I was 10, my sister, her dad was a minister, and she would go through phases where she was on fire for God, and then she'd do what she wanted and things of that nature. But she always, no matter what, she'd take me swimming at Shepherd's Rest. There's an old school reference.
I live right.
Yeah,
I drive by there and think about that place all the time.
Man, that was fun. And that, I do think of more innocent times around Sulphur than how it is right now with the population increase and all the different problems. But so when I was 10 years old, I had an encounter with God that I know was, my salvation experience, if you will. And I had me a little Bible, and I know it was 1986 because they used to have the top 8 at 8 on Bayou 104.
Yeah.
And so I would listen to the top 8 at 8, and it was Ozzy Osbourne, "Shot in the Dark" was the number 1 song. So that means it was 1986. You know what I mean? After that would end, I'd turn off the radio, and then I would try to read my little King James Bible with a 10-year-old brain and education. And so I didn't get as much out of it, and I didn't have anybody, that was sitting down and teaching me the Bible. And at the same time, I didn't really seek after it. I wasn't going to Wednesday night youth groups or any of that stuff. But I did get to go to church on Sunday sporadically to a lot of different denominations, and even Catholic church and all kinds of different church, to where now God uses that to help me to try to get along with whosoever will.
There you go.
But from that, our family started having tragic losses.
Okay.
And then my grandmother got emphysema, and she was the one that, because my parents were divorced when I was 2, so I spent a lot of time all over the place, which is typical, unfortunately, around here. So with all that said, I didn't have the consistent, church, being cultured in a church or whatever, any of that kind of stuff. There was a lot of love in my family, but there was also a lot of dysfunction.
Sure, I understand. Yeah.
And with that said, that when my cousins started dying and my grandmother got sick and all that other stuff, that I believed in Jesus. I understood that God was supposed to be good. I understood some of the core teachings, about fornication and abusing substances or whatever else that you needed to be level-headed, basically. And I picked up on all that just from paying a little bit of attention when I was a preteen, if you will.
Yeah.
And then when all these funerals started happening, and then I was getting around age to get my driver's license, and then every time that I saw people in my family with a Bible, there was tragedy, and then when my granny died, that was like that broke me on the inside. And then I looked at all of this loss from a car accident from my cousin before his 19th birthday, if I'm not mistaken, and then another cousin, and then my grandmother, and then we had Kenneth Brigman in the skateboarding accident in Lake Charles, which helped lead to Brother Larry's skateboarding ministry, and all that stuff. And I just started to think that if God is so good, how come I'm not experiencing that?
Right.
Or why is every time my family's crying when the Bible's out? So long story short, too late, I just used that. And with the things going on and being an introvert, which we spoke about that earlier, and I didn't have any idea what that was. They make it like it's a curse, you're weird, you like to be alone,
right,
or whatever it is. It's like, no, I just like to talk to the people that I know are interested in what I have to say. But I didn't understand any of that stuff when I was a kid, so
sure, nobody's telling you that stuff when you're a kid. I was the same way. You think you're just like, I'm not trying to derail you, but
no, it's the truth.
I can relate to what you're saying 100%. I was much more at home alone in the woods, just by myself, walking around building forts and just trail chopping and camping than I was in the thick of things.
Yeah, and you have your couple of friends or your cousin or whoever you identified with that was helping you do that, and you can have stronger relationships sometimes.
Yeah, close, intimate bonds, yeah.
And so when all that stuff started happening, and I was introduced, and I was already sneaking beers when I was 8 years old and stuff like that. That wasn't really, that was just Louisiana culture, in my opinion. But when I started to delve into drugs, with that, then I got my driver's license, and when I was about 15 years old, I figured out that everybody, basically that everybody was full of it, and that the politicians were all a bunch of crooks, and I believed more of Ozzy Osbourne's philosophy, in the War Pigs, post-Vietnam lyrics towards the government, anti-establishment, all that stuff. My heart never purposefully raged against Jesus. You understand?
I understand.
I never was against God. I just thought, that I was more or less an afterthought, or that life was unattainable for somebody like me.
Yeah.
And so with all that stuff said, that by the time I was 17 years old, I was, I was slowly and sometimes rapidly immersing myself into the drug culture, and then I still graduated high school, but by the time I was 19 years old, I had the girl that I thought I was going to marry. I had, money in both pockets and 2 bank accounts and 2 vehicles and a hideout in the country and places I could go spend the night. And I was a pretty decent drug dealer for a time, not far as profit goes, but far as getting away with it goes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then I had one of my best friends get killed, Greg Hines, in 1995. And so from my little fantasy world, because we're in Sulphur, if you're listening to the Ghetto Boys or whatever it is, that you think, oh yeah, that's over there in Fifth Ward, Houston, that kind of stuff doesn't happen here, so I thought I was living that life. I just didn't really realize how far off the cliff I had jumped. It was just normal life for me and a lot of my friends. And so, but when I came to town and I heard what happened to him, and then I felt bad because I was out at my hideout in Ragley with my girlfriend, and I should have been in town. If I felt like if I would have been in town, that wouldn't happen. And there's another guy that also feels the same way. He's in law enforcement and cage fights and walks with Jesus, but he was also one of Greg's good friends, and we both felt that burden that we should have been there, or that wouldn't happen like that.
Yeah.
And so then with all that stuff from my childhood started to come back, and then I started, I didn't read as much as I should have when I was younger. So I didn't understand about depression or about the long-term effects of drug abuse or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so while I didn't plan on being a drug dealer my whole life either.
Well, you didn't. That wasn't a career goal, was it?
Yeah, that was just something I wanted to get out of my system, to get established, and then go to college and do something else. And maybe ironically write a book about those goofy experiences. But I never wanted to grow up. That was not on the agenda.
Right.
But so after that happened, I ended up losing that relationship, and it was a 2-year slide. And then so shortly after that, I ended up getting my first drug charge. Which, I always said I'm not going to be one of these little people that get in trouble with, a small little amount of drugs. They should swallow that or, not be stupid. But, so I got busted with conspiracy with intent to distribute 50 pounds, illegal use of U.S. currency, and some type of weapon that somebody had on them. I don't even think it was a gun. It might have been a knife. But that whole incident, I had already been removed from selling drugs for 6 months, and I was trying to go to McNeese.
Oh, so when that happened, you had already kind of begun the
But
changing.
Nobody believes you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
See, okay.
And so that's why I'm careful when I listen to people, because in this story, that was the truth that I was still using casually, but I walked away from being, a wide open drug dealer.
Okay,
and I was staying at my mom's, and I was going to college, and then I got in an argument with my girlfriend, and somebody came over to my house and said, hey, let's go do this, and I told them, no, I'm not doing it. I'm studying for this test. I'm gonna be somebody. And listen, man, we're in the rabbit hole now, but so the guy came over and said, let's go do this, and I told him, no, I'm studying for my test. And then I called my girlfriend, and I was like, look, you're going to stop by on your way home. And then we got in horrific argument. Okay, so then I went and got me a 6-pack of Long Neck Ice House. I remember all this stuff like it was yesterday, because you relive these kind of stories, because when you're sitting in jail, you're thinking, how did I get myself?
Yeah, you're counting the beans. Like, okay, what domino fell, and where was, if I'd have done this or that, and where was the path? Oh man, the fork in the road.
And so 4 beers in, and I'm mad, but I'm still trying to do my homework. Without me calling, without me inviting the trouble, my friend came back and said, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, you know what? Forget school, forget you, forget her, forget them. I'm going to go back to doing what I know. And so there was no social media and all this communication.
Right.
So I didn't know all these sub-stories that were happening. And I didn't know that this guy was wanted and all kind of other stuff. I didn't know what
he just catches you at the right time, particularly where that little chink is in your armor.
That's right. And I flashed out. And when you get busted with that much narcotics or that people don't believe you, it looked like to my family like this dude. It looked like I was getting worse.
Yeah, they go, well, what do you expect? Yeah.
And so that sent me into some serious depression.
And I'm happy, I know it. I'm helpless.
Sorry for interrupting the conversation, but I have something I need to tell you about. You may or may not know this, but this podcast is produced in the city of Sulphur, Louisiana, one of the sister cities that make up Southwest Louisiana. All of my childhood memories are wrapped up in the city of Sulphur. It's my home, and it's been a good home for most of my life. There is a growing diversity of unique businesses, services, and events in Sulphur, each with a rich and colorful story to tell about their particular place in this little jewel on the west side of the Calcasieu River. My mission is to promote good news, to put a positive signal out in the world. That's why my team at Parker Brand Creative Services has created the new brand, Sulphur Today. Here's how it works. Post your Sulphur event, service, photos, videos, or information using the hashtag Sulphur Today. That's it. My team and I will scan and curate those posts through the social media platforms we've put in place. Before you make your post, just type hashtag. That's a £sign for the folks that don't know what a hashtag is. And the words Sulphur Today with no space. My team at Parker Brand is monitoring this tag right now, and they're ready to create positive digital curb appeal for our city by sharing all the very best Sulphur has to offer through the Sulphur Today social media pages. As the Sulphur Today project grows, we will be scheduling interviews and video sessions with businesses, events, and services so they can tell their story of Sulphur Today in a series of ongoing micro-documentaries. Look for the eye-catching Sulphur Today sign when you're out and about. And be ready, we may be stopping by to visit you for a photo op. And don't forget to stop by the Parker Brand Creative Services studio in Sulphur to grab a Sulphur Today decal for your vehicle or business. We want people visiting our area to know that they can find all the wonderful things we have to offer with ease and be a part of our history by utilizing the Sulphur Today pages or by searching the Sulphur Today hashtag. Do you want to help us tell the story of Sulphur Today? Here's what I need you to do right now. Visit and like the Facebook page at facebook.com/Sulphur Today. And be sure to share positive Sulphur information and post often using the hashtag Sulphur Today. Now, back to Find the Good News.
I love you just as well.
So I had that case constantly pending over me. And that's where I willfully, I understand Keith Whitley drinking himself to death or whatever, because all that was tough. But any given time, I'm sure there were lifelines sent to me, that I just was ignoring at the time, But that's where, from that, I ended up getting into all kinds of stuff and spiraling out of control. And then I would do good and I would bounce back and I would go back, get thrown out of the house and then decide, okay, I'm going to try to go to college one more time and all that stuff. And then, so then I had a new girlfriend and I was going to school and I wasn't very good at soccer when I was in high school, but I got better when I was 19 and stuff. And so McNeese had a soccer club, so I was going out for that soccer club. And then I found out that my girlfriend was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And that was a shock to me, because I thought, that we were taking care of all that stuff, and but I was unaware of it. And so with me having an unstable life and looking at the way my dad had done for me, which he did probably the best he could with his struggles that he had, and I found out later that he was a victim of child abuse and other stuff like that. Oh, and so he was afraid to be that kind of dad for me. And so when it came time for me to make that choice, I couldn't say that I was going to, I was afraid. I was afraid that I was going to ruin maybe not just another human's life, but a whole network of people's lives, because I did not believe in myself. I didn't have, any kind of spiritual, Ozzy Osbourne is not going to help you in situations like this, You
had no advocate.
Yeah. And so I did have one person encourage me that, my uncle, but, because he probably had to do the same thing, dig deep, it's time to grow up and forget everything else.
Yeah.
But, so what we did was we placed my daughter for adoption and interviewed families. And so we followed through with that. And that was one of the toughest decisions that I ever made in my life.
Yeah.
And
how old were you at this time?
About 23.
23. Wow.
And with all that turmoil from every different direction, so there's grief, there's depression, there's all this other stuff, and then just trying to discover who I am. And
that's a lot for a 23-year-old man, and that's a lot.
Yeah, well, but I could have just went straight to college and got my degree and done, there's some...
Still a lot, though.
Yeah, I love to encourage young adults to not do the things that I did, if at all possible. Mm-hmm. So while there's a lot of people in ministry that might be upset with young people that aren't necessarily living the exact cookie-cutter Christian life, I'm glad if they're going forward.
Right.
Because at any given time, when you do decide to change...
That's right.
It'll be a lot easier.
That's true. Yeah, you don't want to always have to... unfortunately, and I'm listening to everything you're saying, I'm just so many things... And I want to derail your train there, because I'm totally I'm on board. But you don't want people to have to always find God through suffering. Unfortunately, we do very often. If we're lucky, we do. But you don't want that for your fellow man.
No,
and that's what you're kind of saying. Now, you don't want them to hey, look, maybe they're not living the life that their church or their tradition wants them to live. But hey, are they staying clean? Are they giving themselves a chance? Because there may come a day, if they're giving themselves a chance, there'll come a day
they can make.
You don't want them to.
What I'm saying is, anybody can change. And I'm a firm believer that Jesus loves anybody. But if there's somebody that's, what some people would call, and I say it sometimes too, fence straddling, or you got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, or whatever it is, I'm going to tackle you and get the other foot and get the other foot in on the other side of the line. And but I try to do that in love. And I try to believe that that if you don't get down here in the abyss where I headed. So after that choice was made, you could have told me anything up until that point in my life, I really could shake it off. I really didn't care what you said or whatever. But after that happened, I slid into what would probably be categorized as some type of serious depression.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go talk to anybody because of the stigma of going to talk to somebody. It's almost normal now, but back then you didn't talk about your stuff. And so from that point forward, I said I would never sell drugs again. And that was basically the truth. From that's one vow that I did keep to myself, because I did not want my choices to personally affect another other people trying to do good. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to derail somebody else that could possibly start a family because I want to go to the club and take all my friends with me. I just thought that was really stupid. And so my eyes were open that there was more going on to life than this. You know what I mean? And I felt God's presence when I held my little girl for the first time, and then I felt like all of it got extinguished. And so I slid into the depression all the way, just to make a long story short.
No, that's a lot, man. I mean, God, dude, I'm sorry. That node right there in your life, that's just so heavy, man. I can see all of that, everything you're saying. I'm sorry. That what you just said, because my daughter, I that was a powerful moment for me too when my daughter was born. I remembered, I tell people I laughed and cried at the same time like an insane person. And I said somebody... Very shortly after, I said it was like I saw heaven and earth come together for the first time.
Yeah.
All at once in this elation. And it was like everything, the whole history of humanity, just watching your child be born. And so I try to imagine myself in that moment and then having all that pulled away.
And some people tried to tell me, oh, look, just that was parental instinct. Just relax. And for me, it was much more than that. Mm-hmm. It was like I got revealed, more of really what was going on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And
you got a peek at like a different kind of glory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, hey, and it's a little sidebar note, but people always say, they think they need to be the worship leader, they need to be the one teaching the class, they need to be the one starting a church or whatever. But man, that is your ministry, your family. That is your number one ministry, pouring love and guiding and learning how to live life through its ups and downs and side to sides. That is your number one ministry for everybody. But what happened for me, just to really just make the long story short, is I slipped into darkness, and I started to do harder drugs and stay, and I really became, I drank heavily by choice, but the anxiety medicine, I became addicted to that. But when you're taking methamphetamines, for example, cocaine, whatever else that, all that, it just, you feel euphoric for a little while, and you're like, and you almost get a revelation like, hey, this is what I need to do, and this is why a lot of people do drugs, because your endorphins kick in, especially you accumulate, because I would get 2 or 3 months of clean time and then, snort a line of methamphetamines, and then all of a sudden it's almost like you could get this wave of creativity or this fake euphoric sense that everything is going to be all right. I need to join the military. I need to make this amends. I need to do this. I need to show my mom. I don't need to tell her that I'm sorry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all that stuff. And then but if you don't do what you feel like you should have done, which is what 95% of people do, stay on drugs, that you start to lose touch with reality, and then you're just high. You know what I mean? And then you're And so I eventually had to go, and I would try to work. I would try to do things, try to reinvent myself, whatever it was, try to immerse myself in the music culture, all kinds of different things. But eventually I got arrested. So I've been arrested probably at least 14 times that I can remember, probably more than that, let loose a lot more from Mercy. And but I went on the run from the police, and I lived in Texas because I had warrants in Louisiana. And so in Texas, I started framing houses for cash. And then there, I really took a step further into addiction. After I was staying with a safe friend of mine from high school, and then God gave him his wife, and he's still married to this day, and has 2 beautiful children. But when he got married, I had to go stay with his cousins, and there's not too much the matter with them, but they were just, basically, typical like redneck kind of lifestyle, you know what I mean? And that really wasn't me, you know, and I never could let any of that other stuff go. You know what I mean? Because I'm a thinker. And so the enemy would make me constantly think about the relationships I lost, about what's going on.
So you were carrying a lot of guilt and tragedy,
Oh my
just
God.
like a big weight.
Oh, yeah. And Fun, let me explain something to you. Fun left town 5 years ago. You know what I mean? I stayed in that condition. There's some people that say, you know, when they met me during this time, and they say, oh, yeah, we had a pretty good time in the oil field or whatever, and I was thinking to myself, man, I must have been faking pretty good,
you were miserable,
because I was dying on the inside during that whole period of time. So I picked up this book because I wasn't ready to pick up the Bible at a flea market in Texas, and it was The Hidden Power of Your Subconscious Mind.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, and then listen, in this book was the Serenity Prayer.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
So I've always been a thinker, you know, and I was into Edgar Allan Poe, and I was into heavy metal lyrics, and, you know, things like that. But so that was profound to me. So I wrote that down. And
was that your first exposure to that prayer?
Yes.
Was in that book? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That was my
Wow.
first. Yeah.
That's something. Man.
And so I stuck that on my wall because I thought that was, you know, in my room I was renting. And one of the guys from the framing crew came in there, you know, and there's everybody, we talk lots of trash. It's like a bunch of sailors. And well, he walked in there and said whatever he had to tell me. And then when he went to leave, he saw that prayer on the wall. And he said, what you got that stupid thing they say in NA and AA on your wall? And I said, man, shut up, bro. You know, because I don't let people downplay whatever. I said, maybe it's because you're just too dumb to think for yourself. And
Did you know at the time that was related to AA and NA? Had you really?
No,
okay,
listen,
yeah,
dude.
okay,
Yes, that's what I'm saying. No, I had no idea.
So he says that to you.
So he said that to me, and I just downplayed. I probably cussed him a little bit or whatever, just downplayed it. Like, man, you don't have the substance to understand what that says, dude. Just get out my room. And then later on, I started thinking, if that's what they say in them rooms, then maybe I ought to go check some of them out sometime. Dude. You know, and because, you know, when I would say my prayers, because my grandmother that I spoke of that passed away from emphysema, she taught me the Lord's Prayer. And so when I was out there in Texas, I would try to say my prayers, and I just felt like the walls, I felt like basically, you know, when Luke Skywalker's trying to grab that thing to keep the trash compactor from smashing.
Yeah.
That's how I felt like my life was during that time. And so I finally had these little epiphanies going on, you know. Oh man, I'm trying not to get emotional. But,
I'm sorry, I'm over here getting emotional. No, that doesn't help.
This is good because it's profound truth. Because it's not a coincidence that these things were happening. Okay, so my mom at home in Sulphur, she went through 2 divorces with my sister's dad and with my mom's dad, and she said, I will never get married again. And still to this day, she hasn't. But my grandmother was passing away, so she was closed to the things of God, open more to spirituality, but closed to Jesus, because she saw a bunch of posers in the church and people that don't love like Jesus, which is part of one of the things I advocate for.
Yeah.
But so my mom got touched through that, and she became a Christian for real. Not Jesus is out there. No, she's walking with Jesus, and so they put my name on the prayer list. And so this little Methodist church and whoever else she could talk to was praying for me. And man, I used to drive my mom crazy, if you can just imagine from this short bit that you've heard. So what she did was, you know, she took a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I don't have it here. I would be bawling. And wrote a prayer out for me.
She wrote it for you.
She wrote a prayer out on my behalf saying that God protect Sean from death, protect his mental facilities, put good people in his life, have mercy on him, and all that stuff.
Wow.
And listen, I have no idea because nobody because nobody would try to talk to me, man, because
they were just like, hey, he's trouble, leave him alone. Huh?
Yeah, I was unapproachable.
Right,
but
right.
In everyone else's defense, I was a handful, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's why I have the grace now to deal with difficult people and people detoxing and people flashing out, and they say, well, how can somebody do this? And I was, look, hey, buy me a cup of coffee, I'll tell you, because I was right there at the threshold, partnering with darkness on the edge until these little things started to happen. And so one final day, when I was coming home from the framing job, we had my friend's truck. It had no tags on it, but if we lived, around the Silsby Lumberton area, whatever, that you could take some back roads, and you only had one stretch of highway if you knew where you were going. And so I came to the highway, and then there was I don't remember if it's a state trooper or a sheriff's department, and my friend was sick. So normally I would ride with them, bring no identification to work, have a firm story about what my name is, and because Texas and Louisiana don't communicate the best, especially they didn't back then anyway. That's why I was in Texas. But so I basically had this cop swing back around after me. So I burned out on the highway when his lights came on, going the other direction. And when I hit, because the road I was going was only 2 blocks away. And so then I'm right there. And so now I'm trying to slow down so I can make the curve. The brakes went to the bottom of the truck, and I ran over a stop sign and ripped the tire off of the truck. But it stayed moving. And so I swung around on that road and then pulled in to the neighbor's driveway in the vicinity of where I'm staying, jumped out of the truck, jumped through the couple of fences into the bushes, laying flat in the bushes and watching to see what happened. And as soon as my heartbeat went from cardiac arrest level, I realized my name is Sean and my life has become unmanageable.
Wow.
Because this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It just hit you like, I'm done with this.
Yeah. Well, and from there, and from that book, and from my mom and them's prayers, that I came home, which, to tell you, that is not ironic, but I came home and I went to my mother's pastor, and because he was a good relational pastor, which all pastors should be relational, even if you're an introvert like I am. But he was there at all the family, every time somebody was sick, every time there's a funeral, every time there's a wedding, he would assist in those matters and be there. He wasn't Stephen Furtick on his entertainment level, but he was a good man, and so that's why I went to him. And that's where, as a grown man, that I surrendered. I'm not gonna say I quite surrendered yet, but I did come back to the Lord officially. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I entered into two of the nastiest years of my life, because I was back into where all my friends were. And we call it our stomping grounds. Mm-hmm. And
so you're back here now. At this point, right? I'm
back in Sulphur.
Okay.
I drew a line through all of that. I came home. I answered to my warrants, and I decided that this is not what I'm going to do. I knew Jesus was the only shot. That's where I started delving. I always wrote darker things and heavy metal song lyrics and stuff like that. But I wrote this poem, and it started out that way. It started out dark, but at the end, it had a little twist of hope. And I did put a handful of these poems, in the book that I finally finished writing. But the poems was surrender. You know what I mean? And I was reading The Purpose Driven Life. I was reading the Bible. I was trying to visit church. I was trying to do all these things. But I finally caught a knee and had that forward motion. And then I was going to get sentenced to AA and stuff anyway. So I went and visited my first AA meeting, because I like to, just like I was going to be on this podcast, I found somebody that I knew on your list. And so I checked that one out before I showed up here. So
yeah, I
was like, well, I'm fixing to get stuck doing this anyway. I might as well go see.
Yeah.
And I was still in denial about my problem with pharmaceutical medicine, anxiety medicine. So I went to AA because I figured I could stop drinking, then maybe I wouldn't abuse the medicine, or the medicine wouldn't hit me in that way. And it was where I needed to be. I never planned on sharing. I never planned on opening up. I was just testing the waters. You know? And then when it came around to me and it was my turn, I just broke, cried. You could smoke cigarettes, thankfully, and say cuss words in those rooms at the time, so I felt real comfortable. And then I went, to my mom's house and that night. And I don't recommend doing stuff out of emotion, but I knew I had to move, and I went and I showed up at her house and I told her, look, I'm sorry. I can't promise that that from this point forward I'm done, but I can promise that I'm trying.
Yeah.
And
one foot in front of the other.
One foot in front of the other. And it took all of that, and so basically, in summary, I was reading the Bible. I got to the part in Colossians where it says, work like you work for God, not man. And so then I started, and I worked hard when I was in Texas, but we made it fun as it could be. But that's when I switched and I started to work like I used to party and like I used to play sports. And basically you're unstoppable then. Because that's the only gear that I have is stop and vibe, basically. And so I went out to the boat and barge division of PSC in Cameron when that still existed, and then I made foreman in 6 months. And what I was doing every now and then was I never had self-control up until that point, and I would dabble a little bit, or I'd make 3 months and I would try, and it was just one obstacle after another. And what I'm saying is they hired a meth cook as the operations manager.
Yeah.
I mean, how am I supposed to be able to, pay my probation officer out here at this job that I just decided I'm going to do the best I can? I'm not really that mechanically inclined, but it doesn't take a rocket science to take apart diaphragm pumps and, do all that stuff. So here we go. This is the turning point, that I got my last. I made foreman. I got my truck. I got my driver's license. I paid cash money for an '89 custom Suburban. And it looked like I was turning the corner.
Yeah.
It didn't take 28 days. I got my last and final DWI, I think in 2001 or 2002.
Really?
And then from that's where I stopped picking and choosing what I was going to believe out of the Bible.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so that led me, and there was a friend of mine, and probably a friend of ours, somebody that you definitely know, was connected at a Pentecostal church. And this dude was a complete jerk. You know what I mean? And in the world, because he was right there with me. And then we also had Chad Norwood at Bayou Beds.
Yeah.
He became a Christian, and he was living in Houston. So I had two people that I used to, live in the drug culture with, basically, and do whatever we wanted. And I knew that they were changing, or that they were different. And
something had happened,
and I couldn't deny it, but I was still suspect. But they encouraged me. Chad encouraged me from a distance, and this other friend, my other friend Chris, he gave me a ride over there to his church. And so the reason I went is because I was stuck in the cycle of I would get 4 months clean and then I would fall off. I would get 3 months and then I would fall off. And when I mess up, it's get the cameras ready kind of mess up. It's not it's like I think I can, I'll take a couple of pills, have a cocktail, and we'll just go to Lane and Wayne's or whatever. And then I end up passed out on the table, and people are just taking a look at me before they walk in, because I lost all my tolerance, you know what I mean? And I could have had frontal lobe brain damage. I really don't know, but I was done, and I was tired of that. I was glad for those 3 months, but I never I try to teach people to enjoy the ride now. You know, I didn't really enjoy it. It was tooth and nail to get that time. And so finally I went to church with my friend, and I sure didn't expect that I was going to go let people pray for me in the front at a Pentecostal church. And they said, well, do you need to receive Jesus? And I said, no, absolutely not. You know, I know I'm saved. I don't need that. And then the last thing he said was something to the effect of, maybe you're stuck and you need the power from the Holy Ghost to get free. Oh man, I was already drifting up there. It was like a homing beacon, you know. And so they prayed over me and all that stuff, and it was awesome. But it didn't really happen for me right there at the moment, you know. And so when I left my phone in the car, and so when I got out of church on a Wednesday night, I looked at my phone, and there were 7 missed calls from every possible kind of temptation. There was people trying to return drugs to me that they ripped off. I'm just going to leave it at that when I say that there was every type of temptation, because I'm not exaggerating. And so I had, you know, less than $10, half a pack of cigarettes. I'm taking care of my dad, who had 98% blockage in his heart, helping him pay his bills, helping pay my probation officer. I'm doing the best I can, but it ain't very fun. It's not fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It's really not.
Well, you're probably having those feelings, man, that most people have, is like, what's life even about? If this is what it is, what am I even... I mean, I'm not saying that...
Yeah.
I'm saying that because I hear people tell me stuff like that. They go, I'm just in a trap. It's just a trap. It's just a bunch of suffering on top of suffering, and I'm working and trying real hard, and just nothing good's happening from it, and it's just I'm stuck.
Yeah, I had to live every day like it's your last one. I had that tragically skewed. You know what I mean? Of meaning that we're going to party, we're going to, you know, whatever it was, because that was the only flash of happiness I knew at a better time, you know. But so I said, I'm not going to do it. So I came home. I didn't answer any of those calls. Well, somebody showed up at my house, and I said, look, tonight I'm just not going to do it. You know, you can do it. I'm not going to do it. I said, I'm not saying I'm done. I said, I'm just saying that tonight I'm not doing it. And that this is what's going on in my life. And I'm going to figure out if I'm going to be a Christian or if I'm going to shut up talking about it. And he said, okay, bruh, you know, and then he took off. And when the back door of my house closed, when that person left, you know, to this day, I have never been the same. You know what I mean? That I was filled with the Holy Spirit. The darkness that was in my house shifted. You know, there's a scripture, you know, and I'm not trying to preach, but it says, resist the devil, he will flee from you. Draw close to God, and he will draw close to you. And that's one of my life verses, because I didn't just get the power by going to the altar. You know what I mean? Because I really believe Jesus wanted to teach me that the Holy Spirit is not a drug. You know, and so I had this epiphany, and you know, and I'm definitely not an advocate of hate, but a lot of people, some people may have watched American History X.
Oh yeah,
okay?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, but at the end, when those guys have the epiphany, when Edward Norton starts tearing all that stuff off of his wall, and he's like,
oh, I remember the scene. Yeah,
he says, I have been living a lie that I don't even know who I am. So that's the best way I can describe it to people about the communion that I had with the Lord that night. You know, that I took some of my heavy metal flags off the wall. I threw my pornography collection in the trash. I was just done. I mean, I was really done. And I was scared at the same time, because my identity had been in, you know, quoting Scarface, selling drugs, being Little Sean B, this, that, whatever. You know, I can't go, you know, to the club without some arm candy. I needed this, I needed that, I needed all these other things. And in just 3 days' time, man, I found out that I was really clueless.
Wow.
And that is what set me off, and I can summarize it real quick from there. That I learned that God told me three or four things I needed to do, which was join the old Life Church, which is no longer Life Church, now it's the Gathering, and then I needed to commit to the Celebrate Recovery program, which was like the Christian version of the 12 steps, and that I needed Mike Richard, who we call him the Godfather, because he started the first Christian recovery in this area back in 03, 04, and which was probably answering my mom's prayers. You know what I mean? Because I had a place to crash land. You know what I mean? And they helped nurse me back to life and help teach me who I am, you know, and discover, you know, not brainwash me or whatever else, or tell me I need to wear a jacket or, you know, whatever it was that, you know, because I was about 105, 110 pounds sober because of anxiety just squeezing me. And that's where, from that point forward, when I found those places, I heard God's voice, and then his overwhelming presence left from that degree that it was, and then I was forced to live out the things that he spoke to me.
And I'm happy, I know it. I'm helped.
I hate to pause the program, but I want to ask you something. Did you know that you can help me and my team at Parker Brand Creative Services grow the Find the Good News signal? For less than a fancy cup of coffee, you can become an Early Risers Club patron on our Patreon page. What's Patreon? Well, it's a way for creators to fund their projects by pooling support from those really passionate people that believe in what they're doing. Do you believe in what we're doing with Find the Good News? I hope you do. We believe that there's already enough negative news in the world, even right here at home, and that good people doing good works deserve a platform to speak from too. That's why we created Find the Good News, and we believe in that simple mission. Maybe you believe in it too. If you do believe in finding and sharing good news, then head over to our Patreon page right now or check out the link in the show description. For a commitment of $3.33 a month, you can join the Early Risers Club of Find the Good News Patreon supporters and get access to the B-Sides, a patrons-only podcast with the crew behind Find the Good News, Parker Brand Creative Services. Each time we level up, the Patreon rewards will get bigger. If you're tired of old news, bad news, and fake news, help support Find the Good News at patreon.com/findthegoodnews. That's patreon.com/findthegoodnews. Now, back to the episode.
I love you just as well.
Wow.
And I feel that's where people go wrong in the church today, is they get touched by God and they go home and eat a sandwich. You know, like, hey, feed the children. Okay, it's, you know, it's Thanksgiving.
It happens to many people. I've been on several retreats that I've seen that same thing happen where, you know, when you're in an isolated, hermetically sealed experience like a retreat, you can envision a better world for yourself. You can envision a better life. You can see yourself allowing the better version of yourself to shine and to grow and to change, and you have all that. But again, you get out of the retreat, and maybe that hangs on for a while. But then the real world just keeps coming at you, and you're like, this just ain't plugging in with real life out here. What am I going to do? And then I see a lot of people where it all melts away. You know, it just gets destroyed, and they got to go back to another retreat, get rebuilt back up over and over again.
And I don't believe that's biblical. It's good for people need to do whatever it takes. I'm a firm believer of that. But I don't believe that that's true biblical. I don't believe that's Jesus's design, because I believe he wants us to live in victory on Tuesday.
Right. You know, wherever you're at, whatever you're experiencing. I said that I recently had a conversation with another guest on the show, and the words that came out of my mouth was that it has to work on my front porch, which is where I end up praying the most.
Yeah.
You know, it has to work at the store, it has to work in traffic, it has to work whenever there is any circumstance. So if it's only applicable, I used to hear somebody one time, I'm not going to derail us too much, but it stands out to me. I remember I was in my 20s and I was working for somebody who was pretty despicable. I mean, mistreated their employees pretty bad, and I happened to be one of them. But he knew I was spiritual, I guess, at that time. I wouldn't have called myself a Christian necessarily, but I mean, I felt close to God. And so some of what I said and what he said didn't align, but he felt like it was his mission to just teach me the way his church believed things to be, and he came at it in a very aggressive way, and it was very uncomfortable to me. And I think once he sensed that it was uncomfortable, it made the desire for him to do it even more. It was almost used as a bullying type tactic.
Dude.
So which drives, that'll drive you away from religion.
That'll drive you away from God. That'll drive you away from AA. That'll drive you away from anything.
But he said something that I'll never forget. And so there was somebody who'd come into this shop I happened to be working at, and he wanted a discount on something. And so he pulls out a calculator out of his pocket, and now here I am putting this man's sins on blast. I'm not trying to do it, but it's relative to what he said. He did a little calculating on his calculator, and I happened to work at the shop, and I happened to be standing there, and it was a church that was wanting a banner or something like that for a thing they were doing, a fundraiser. And he said, "Well, I can't give it. I can't give it to you for free, but I'll cut you a deal." And he did a little punching, and he said, "I can do it for this much a foot and for this price." And they were like, "Oh, thank you so much for cutting us a deal." They took the order. He took their money, and I said, after they left, I said, "That's the regular price." And he said, "Business is business. This ain't Jesus times." And it stuck with me. I mean, I'm 45 years old. I was 20 then, but I'll never forget that experience. And I was like, this guy who has been
coming at me
just did this to somebody else who has come in from another church and played like they were getting a discount. And the words he used was so painful to me. I realized in that moment that it has to work everywhere. That statement, "This ain't Jesus times,"
dude,
stuck with me like somebody had just buried it in my brain. I was like, forevermore, even to this day, I go, that's not true. Every single moment, forwards and backwards throughout history, this has to be applicable. The way that whatever Christ is trying to teach us or help us to be has to be applicable when you're wiping your butt, all the way to whenever you're cooking a glorious meal for your family. It has to be at the dirtiest thing to the most glorious thing that you're doing. It has to be everywhere. It can't be just for picking and choosing when I want to be that way. Does that make sense? I know that's crass what I'm saying. I mean, the way I worded that probably is offensive to some.
No, it's okay. I think
it's
absolutely the truth. And because, okay, this is what I'm so thankful for, is that that I was around a bunch of people that and I branched out some too, but they taught me to focus on my relationship with Jesus. That I was not diamond cut into a religious system. See, I would go so far as to say, this is kind of goofy, but I'm getting this quote from Corky Romano coming into my head, which is a goofy little slapstick comedy where he says, "Bad dogs aren't born, they're made." And because that's what I'm getting this visual of this guy, kind of just like harping like a dog, and that's not it. That's really not. That's not the. That is religion. The way that it should be, okay, and this has been said, and I say it quite often, is that it should be like eating ribs. Okay, well, you're a vegetarian. Hey, I respect that, but I'm gonna stay over here and I'm gonna eat these ribs. And you know what? They got Sweet Baby Ray's on them, and I've marinated them 24 hours, and I slow cooked them. That I put them in the smoker for a little while. And then I threw them on the grill, and I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna eat my ribs, and I'm not gonna force you to eat my ribs. I'm not gonna tell you that you can't enjoy that salad. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sit right here and I'm gonna eat these ribs, and sooner or later you'll either respect that, hey, that dude's enjoying his ribs. He's respectful at the table. You know, he's smiling, he's joking.
Yeah.
That he's sure enjoying those ribs, whether I'm a vegetarian or not.
Yeah.
You know, and people are so worried about that's going to influence me or whatever else, and it's sad. And that's the way that I explain it to people, that you can choose, you know, which you believe. I'm a relatively new fan of this show, not just because I'm on it, but because that, you know, but because that it shines a positive light with real, genuine conversation to things that are happening. Okay, why part of the negativity that we're experiencing now is because stuff is hyped.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And if it's hyped, then you get ratings, and you can just keep on doing that. And that's done.
Yeah.
You know, it's done at our expense.
Sure.
So that the machine can keep on going.
Yeah. Now you're talking. That's right. Yeah.
But true. Look, so after I had came to Jesus and then went through all that process and then finally committed to the things that the Lord told me to do, that the door opened up for me to go on my first. Now I'm working the steps. I'm in my Bible. I'm cutting the grass. I'm at the church. In somebody's first year of recovery, you need to stay busy. You know what I mean? If you're staying busy like that in year 5, then you probably have some unhealed issues that you stones you need to unturn. But I took the Celebrate Recovery Step Study, and I started dealing with some of these issues and dealing with that pain from my daughter and stuff like that. And then I went out to the mission field and didn't really have a clue what I was getting myself into. So I went to Lithuania. I completed the step study, and I went to Lithuania. And
now, what was in Lithuania?
A recovery house. Okay. There was a Baptist minister that was a friend of our pastor's at the time, and we were real mission minded, almost too aggressively jumping through whatever door would open, because the doors need to be ordained. You know what I mean? When you get a little bit more mature, but this definitely was God, and so I got to hear this man's testimony while I was there to say my testimony, and I'm afraid of my church family that I'm developing judging me if I say some of the things I just told you, which I'm not ashamed of anymore. You know what I mean? Because that is no longer who I am. Right. Yeah. You know, and my testimony really begins now. That's just my story. Yeah. What I told you. And so when I heard this man that ran drums of heroin and killed people with his bare hands, he had 2 mafia stars on his knees, and now he's running a small church and overseeing this recovery house. And when he talks, everybody listens. And I thought, you know what? The stuff that I've lived through doesn't disqualify me from doing ministry. It actually gives me something to say. Yeah. And so that was a paradigm shift for me when I heard this guy on the mission field. Okay. And so then at the end of those first 2 weeks, I experienced healing in my heart from the adoption situation, where the Lord told me in 2005, I'm going to take care of this. You stop beating yourself up about it. And so it was real. You know, I never cried. I probably hadn't cried, and you know, besides get me out of this trouble, tears in years. You know, in probably a decade until that point. You know, and so that was awesome. And then I came home. I had one little episode where I digressed after 11 and a half months, because when we evacuated for the hurricane in 2005, I left Jesus in Sulphur. But I learned from that experience that it's not all this. I needed all that support that I had, but it's not all about that I have the Lord with me everywhere that I go, just like what you were saying, and what that gentleman is missing, you know. So when I learned that, and I had no idea that I was about to be living in that country with some of the most beautiful women per capita that I've ever seen in my life, with alcoholism 3rd highest in Europe, suicide rate number 1, abortions. A lady can have up to 5 to 7 abortions, and it's culturally acceptable and normal. And but if it was fruitful, I don't believe all those other statistics would be what they are. And then they have a long, cold winter, which, you know, if you're a street person, you don't have any hope. I'm talking about freeze to death kind of winter.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 years over there, and I honored my commitments to the Lord up to the standard in which I was taught, and sometimes by the skin of my teeth. But I always saw the fruit from it, you know, that I learned, ended up preaching, working with teenagers. Just, there's nothing I didn't do culturally. I started powerlifting with these guys in at the recovery house that had no running water. So I mean, some of the stuff was real primitive, you know. And I would eat whatever they gave me. I would go to weddings. I would go to festivals. I would go anywhere, because just like what you're saying, America now is similar to what Europe was then. You can't pull out a guitar and sing Kumbaya in Lithuania still to this day. Or if we went to the Grove, we may or may not have success. If I just started singing, if I could actually sing, and you know, if we started singing "Mighty to Save" or something like that, and somebody walks by, and because you can do that in some third world countries where the people are still warm and receptive, but it was done through relationships. You know, and it took time. You know, it took them 9 months before they trusted me, before they trusted my motives, before they believed I didn't have a secret girlfriend or whatever. You know, like some of the, I mean, I don't know what they experienced with Americans before, but I know communism. Because of communism, they didn't trust people.
I see. So
I made my 2-year commitment in Lithuania. Then I came home. And then I was in a season of, you know, what am I supposed to do now? Because for me, you heard that story. I was looking for purpose. I was looking for identity. It was like, okay, I'm a missionary now, you know, and there was absolutely nothing that was going to stop me from being a good missionary. But when I came home, it was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Because I always, you know, I help people, and we'll talk about that later. But most people, when they get clean, some of them have kids already, their family they need to support, they need to go right back to work.
Sure.
Or that's not what I did. You know, my mom said, you know, I just got you back, and now you're leaving. But even she realized that what happened in my life, it wasn't just for her. It wasn't just for my family, but there's a purpose behind it. So I had her blessing and the rest of my family's blessing when I did that. But when I came home, I was back in a little identity crisis. But God provided grants, and I continued to go on short-term mission trips all over the world, Nicaragua and different places, Mexico. And when I was going to McNeese, our church hit some turbulence, if you will, and my mentor that I spoke of, Mr. Mike. So when I came back home, I immediately jumped back into the program. But I was his right-hand man, you know.
I see. Okay.
I didn't, and I was on the prayer team, and I helped, and I served, and I did all those same things that I was. But I was a little bit discouraged on the inside, because I thought that I should have been progressing along faster or whatever. But the Lord knew that there were some things in my character that needed to be worked on, and some maturity that needed to happen. So he ended up leaving, and so for 1 year there was no recovery ministry at Life Church, The Gathering. And so I taught a pilot class while I'm going to McNeese, and I'm working 3 jobs, and just doing the best that I can. And all throughout this whole time, I take calls, I help people. I don't recommend it, you know, but I've let people live at my house before I was, you know, aware of sober living communities and things of that nature. I was just doing everything I could, and I didn't understand a lot about boundaries. You know, so I wasn't always the happiest person, because I was letting, you know, and this is something I feel like I had to learn to get where I am now, because now I'm responsible for resources, for donations, for love offerings, for the fundraisers and whatever else. So I can't let anybody exploit the ministry for personal gain, or if they're not really ready to receive help, that it's not just me, which it was before. It was just me and my church, if I could sway them to help people. But I went through this class, the Life Sealing Choices, and I taught it. And I taught 2 pilot classes. And from the pilot classes, that's where I picked the people that were going to help. Form a team. Because there's no way, and then plus I don't need to be ministering to a 30-year-old lady going through a divorce. I can pray for her, I can point her in the right direction, I can encourage her, but she needs a female to sit with her and help her, be her accountability and take her calls. So you have to have a team.
Yeah.
And you have to, and I need accountability. I don't know about everybody else. And I'll tell you later how this is structured. But so around late 2011 or 2012, we officially launched Celebrate Recovery back once again at Life Church, the Gathering. I'm gonna just call it the Gathering now because that's what it is. At the old Kroger building, which the city just purchased. So, and for me, it was really just applying everything that I'd learned and handling the logistics, learning how to take not just correction, but constructive criticism, and not have a chip on my shoulder. Because all those things that we were talking about, religious people, I didn't want no part of them, and because I felt like this is what I'm trying to do. And this is what I know Jesus was about. And if you're not like that, then you can get out of my way and, hold the anointing oil and watch me help somebody. You know what I mean? Y'all the committee can figure it out, but I'm going to already be done by the time y'all,
I understand.
Because hey, you need to fill out these papers so we can reimburse you to bring somebody to rehab. No, how about this? I'm gonna give you the receipts and fill out that paper when I get back, because he needs to get accepted Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. And I don't have time to wait on you to come back Monday morning and decide if you're gonna do this.
Yeah, so I understand that, man. I do.
And nothing against the hierarchy, nothing against the management or the interior design, because every house has to have one. Every church has to have a system. They have to have a vision, and those things need to be in place. But I'm talking about how to help people in the real world, like my mama says. So I was learning how to do that, and learning about, you have to have insurance, you have to have Medicare, you have to have Medicaid, you have to have this, you have to have that. You can't just, like I was talking about tackling people, you can't just tackle somebody, shake them down, and pull the drugs out their pocket and drag them to rehab.
Right, it's not like that, right.
I've done that. It doesn't always bear fruit. You know what I mean? So, but I was learning about all that stuff. I was learning how to have small group leaders. I was learning how to deal with how to deal with women in ministry, because there's a whole different component. They got a different set of emotions and a different set of feelings, and then not just women, but each individual is different. That everybody's got these dynamics in relationships.
Right. Yeah, every person's got their own stuff they're bringing in tailwind.
And what would make this person feel valued might make this person feel offended.
That's right.
Yeah. So all that stuff that I've constantly got my learning cap on. But so we did that with large group, small group worship, me taking calls and helping get people into treatment, and then you have all these dynamics about the way that we do the small groups. We do our small groups very similar to what Celebrate Recovery does, which the small group is one of the most important things, because if you have a religious person, I've had more problems with people that come from a religious background than I have people that are on crack. Because,
can you talk about that for a little bit? Why do you think that is?
Okay, because we have these guidelines that we read before the group starts. Okay, so our groups run in separate men and women small groups, and this is any Freedom Ministry of the South meeting, which you can find on the website, and any true Celebrate Recovery meeting. Okay, so the dynamic of the group is it's separated into men and women small groups, because if you're struggling with sexual addiction or anything like that you don't want anybody to be preying on another person, and they that still can happen, unfortunately, separating the groups, but not near to the degree that if you throw everybody in a gumbo pot and see what happens. So we separate the groups, and then we read the guidelines, which is keep your sharing focused on your own thoughts and feelings. Limit your sharing from 3 to 5 minutes. There is no advice, correction, or preaching. We are here to support one another, not fix one another. That confidentiality is of utmost importance. And basically keep it PG-13. That's what we say. They'll say this is a Christ-centered recovery group and whatever else. I just say keep it PG-13. Samuel Jackson has 1 cuss word. If he says 2 cuss words, then it's R-rated. You know what I mean?
Right. That's a good. I like that.
So that's
kind of the rules of this show too. I think now that you say that. You gotta meet people where they are. I like that. Yeah.
So whatever lesson you experience in large group, you'll have a paper, and then the paper will have those guidelines in front of it. It'll have subject matter, for example, whatever principle of recovery that we're talking about, and then it'll have talking point questions at the bottom. But there's always an open-ended question. For example, share anything from my life, good, bad, whatever it is I'm going through. That way, if what you're going through pertains to absolutely nothing that I've said from large group, nothing that worship didn't touch your heart, whatever it is, and you just want to talk about how you feel going through this divorce, but not throw your spouse or your ex-spouse completely under the bus. Right. We don't encourage that at all, because that's not focusing on your own thoughts and feelings. So and it also says in James, which is one of the scriptures that I love, that if you confess your faults to one another and pray for one another, you may be healed. And so I've been doing this and experiencing this, and this is what got me. I had to go for 6 or 8 weeks, which really, when I see how long it takes to peel some other people's onions, it didn't take me that long, because I'd already been getting chiseled through that whole journey, to get to that place.
Right.
I'd already visited AA. I'd already hit bottoms. I'd already, all that different stuff. I've been to St. Pat's for losing my mind, and been prescribed antipsychotics and all that stuff. So, and I've gone through codependency and tried to force a square peg into a round hole in 2 relationships after I was a Christian that weren't designed for me at the time,
Sure.
And all of that stuff, man, boy, is it frustrating when you're experiencing it in real time. It really is, and it's easy to say, well, God wastes nothing. Well, but when am I going to get my breakthrough? When am I going to get, when is this thing going to turn? When is this going to get easier?
Right.
What is the matter? And I actually, I'm gonna get back to the small groups, but I had a dream one time, and it was a prophetic dream about a lady and some other women that I went to church with at the time. And so I woke up to use the bathroom, like just like a normal thing men do, especially now that we're 40, huh? But so I woke up and I opened the door to go back into my bedroom after I used the bathroom, which is just a standard procedure. And when I opened the door, it was all the ladies from my church, my mothers in the Lord, and people that held me accountable and prayed for me, encouraged me, and been on mission trips and everything else. And this lady just stood up and she said my middle name. She said, Sean Daniel Barron. And I was taken back. I didn't know what to say. And she said, it is not your job to fix people. It is your job to love people.
That's powerful.
And look, dude, I wrote that.
Clean and simple, huh?
Yeah, and then I woke up. And so I got my pencil and wrote down that dream. I went through a season where God was talking to me like that, and then he'll talk to me some other kind of way. Now I just have to pay attention all the time. But I wrote that down and I never forgot it. So the small group time is not to fix people. So if you've been cultured in the church and maybe you're struggling with pornography and you're ready to clean up your internet history because you want to give your wife, you want to have wholesome thoughts. You're raising children. You don't need to breed any of that stuff into your household. So maybe that's what you're there for. But this other guy is in there dealing with drugs or dealing with violence or whatever it is, and maybe he's telling you, you know, how he punched his foreman at Turner or whatever. And it's easy for the religious person to start telling him, hey, well, you need to go read this in Ephesians. You need to do this. You need to take this prescription. You need to read this book. You need to do this, and give them all these instructions about what they ought to do. But the correct response is, thank you for sharing. You know what I mean? And you let that person get it out. They can say something that I don't agree with at all. But if it helps them and they're honoring the guidelines, the correct response is, thank you for sharing. Keep coming back. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you just let that person, because, and then if somebody has a moment and starts crying, man, you let the tears fall. You let the snot come out. You don't grab a tissue. You don't start patting them on the back until their moment is over.
Yeah.
And then you let them have that moment, and then you still say, thank you for sharing. And then the next person that shares what they say, it really shouldn't even be related to what the next person said. You know, and we always say, if you have to, you know, if you piggyback anybody, that you need to say, for me.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when that happens, I went through this or whatever. That you do not try to fix the person and break the rules. And some people have taken offense to that because they're just, you know, and just like that man that you experienced, you know, if they teach, I do believe he was probably taught wrong, and he compartmentalized his Christianity. And so, but in this group, you have to just be you.
Yeah.
You can't be this other person. You can't turn. If you talk Christianese, or if you talk 100% hood, it's really not about how you talk. It's about what you say.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny. It's relevant to something that I've committed to memory. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and it was there's a Jewish rabbi that I like to listen to, and he brings people in to have conversations from different religions. Very good conversations. I always enjoy them. But he was actually talking to another Jewish author, and he said something, I loved it. He said, we need to become very concerned with what the Bible means and not as concerned with what the Bible says. A lot of people are concerned with what the Bible says, but not what it means. And I was like, that's very, very profound, because, you know, you said that Christianese. I guess this show is kind of like that. You know, I've had conversations with people who believe all kinds of different things. And then when the microphone's off, I end up having conversations with people about those shows, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You know, people who listen will then say, hey, I listened to this show. I'm not sure I understand or agree with what y'all talked about. And so I have to always remind, when I get this kind of messages, that to that listener is like, well, that's not my job with this. My job isn't to correct anybody who comes in here, to get them to think like I think, believe what I believe, or even speak the way I speak. I speak about things with the guest. If I have some working knowledge of the way what they talk about, sometimes I'll even speak their language with them for that whole episode.
And you do a little homework. Doesn't change necessarily my own particular framework of speaking, but if I come in here every time somebody comes and sits at this table in the same thing you just described, and then I go, well, I don't believe that. Let me tell you the way it is. To every single person who comes to the table, you ain't helping nobody. You're not getting the message out there. You're not sharing the fullness of that person or allowing them to share the fullness of whatever's on their heart. Yeah, and we're all, you know, we're all in this together. You know, and which I would like to shift gears into that, but I want to finish because you know, it almost brings us to where we are now.
Yeah,
you know, which is so I learned how to do those groups correctly.
Yeah,
which is important.
Yeah, it
sounds
like it's the highest value.
It is, and I've seen, you know, man, I have seen amazing things happen. There's been, you know, people open up and then they pray. Whenever this is where the real ministry happens. I'll let you in on a little secret. So if you're worried about somebody trying to make a move on you or pray for you before you're uncomfortable, or they don't accept you or your lifestyle, whatever, then you come talk to Pastor Sean before you leave and let me fix it. You know what I mean? Let me address that person or that situation. Because the way the enemy works in an environment where there's a lot of people that are trying to heal, there may be somebody that's masquerading as their freedom ministry leadership, and they could say something offensive to somebody, and so please come talk to me about it first.
I've experienced that firsthand. I won't derail you, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
because that is not our heart.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So I learned how to do all that good in the Celebrate Recovery, because I want to call them the Celebrate Recovery Police, but their leadership, because that's like based out of Saddleback. It's an official deal, and I never was interested in being an official group, but I did want to be professional. You know, so when the guy came and he corrected us on, and it was what I would call an off night. And my dad was alive, and he was in the group, and he said some wild things, and I knew from that point forward that that I wasn't going to get green lighted into become an official Celebrate Recovery. And then later I found out that that wasn't God's will. You know, so that happened probably in late 2012 or early 2013, probably 2012. I was still in college, and then so we went, you know, with my team and said, look, we have got to get this down. You know what I mean? And then we spent the next 2 years diligently working on it, bouncing stuff off of each other without breaking confidentiality about what somebody would say. And so then all of a sudden the ministry started growing, and then we would have two men small groups, 2 women small groups, to where now I'm breaking people up like PE, you know, after large group to get into small group. And it still can be a challenging time, but it's all worth it. So right now, in real time, in my testimony in this story, there's only one meeting that's happening. Okay, so during this time we experienced a lot of growth. Like, God started to really bless it. At one point we were having 3 and 4 men's small groups, and a small group is 8 to 12 people. So you got this many men over here, this many women over here. There's not supposed to be that many people coming to a meeting, coming to a recovery meeting, if you will, you know, that doesn't have that much promotion, only social media and word of mouth. And so, you know, at this point I walked on as full-time staff at my church during a time of transition, where there was a lot of, you know, inner turmoil in the church at that time, and but I was still very blessed, and I had a whole lot of growth and a whole lot of development, and learning when to address things and when not to, and all that stuff. But so we changed. My church was personally changing, but the freedom ministry was growing. And we changed. We said that we're not really Celebrate Recovery anymore, so we're going to be Freedom Friday. So that was so our one meeting changed from Celebrate Recovery to Freedom. So then that meeting was just continuing to grow, continuing to have good things happen, and there's people now that no longer really come to the ministry, but they do financially support it, that have been touched and changed and learned the tools that they needed, and now they're just spending time with their family, living fruitful people in society. But my cousin, during this time, she said, well, I'm called to be a missionary. And she was my woman's leader, you know what I mean? And she would address situations in the women's ministry, communicate things, tell me, you know, what is the heartbeat of what's going on there. And plus I was already paying attention. But so her and her husband took off to Mexico, and it hurt. It hurt the ministry. It challenged everybody. It hurt at the time. Let me just say that. And so what happened over the next year and a half is she went over there to teach English and she ended up planting a freedom ministry in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
And so now there is a thriving freedom ministry in Mexico. That's why I was telling you that I got to go back and do that conference.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the real-time stuff is fixing to... It's really exciting.
That is exciting.
Because, so it's easy for me, even now if I'm not careful, to believe Jesus loves you, to believe Jesus loves this guy that I'm bringing to rehab, to believe that God's will for that person is to... But sometimes I've struggled with believing that for me. You know...
what do you mean?
What I mean is, it's just... the grace of God and all that stuff. It's easy for me as an achiever-based introverted personality to just want to jump in the game. Like, hey, the first time I got my picture in the paper for going on a mission trip, and my mom put it on the refrigerator, hey, I was proud about that.
Yeah.
Because getting your name in the paper 14 times for being ignorant and having drug charges associated with it, or disturbing the peace by whatever reason, you know, that if you're not careful,
right,
you'll switch into religiosity, and you'll start getting into performance-based religion that I do believe Jesus loves me, but I sometimes just have a hard time accepting the blessings for me personally.
Yeah, I understand that.
And so,
I do. I totally understand.
You know, that I know it's my job, and when I'm talking to somebody, I absolutely believe when I'm praying. I will drive across Louisiana 10 hours to get you into treatment or whatever we have to do. But for me personally, I really had revelation knowledge that, you know, that God's word is true, that what he spoke to me in 2005 was the truth, and that he loves me too. You know what I mean? And so with that said, I was successful in this the whole time, for the most part, but I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, you know, because I didn't want to, you know, I had a thing against religious people.
Okay.
For the very reasons that we just mentioned.
Really?
You know?
But where does that come from? I'm going to derail you again if I can jump in here. Where does that come from for you? That feeling of the... Well,
it started because I had visited a lot of churches when I was younger. Okay. And then when I came back to the Lord for real, and I started to read the Bible, and I started to study the life of Jesus and his interactions with people, I didn't understand why people would be arguing about how the church is going to spend gravel in the parking lot, or why this person, or why somebody would say one thing and do another, when Jesus said, you know, I have a problem.
I see what you mean. You saw like, hey, these things don't line up, it's not adding up.
I saw people, you know, and it's not just one particular denomination, from various denominations, and I knew no better when I was younger. Do you understand?
Well, sure, right. Who does?
Because when I became a missionary, I took off with just the most pure heart, with the most humble intentions, and believing certain things in the Bible. You know, like if I'm going over there, I want to heal the sick, I want to raise the dead, I want to cast out a devil, I want to do whatever that the Bible says to do. And I made my mind up that I will not, whatever time God gave me when I was a missionary there, that I wanted to make it count. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then I ran into some difficulties with the Southern Baptist, but nobody ever taught me, hey, Southern Baptists don't believe like that in this certain way, and nobody gave me that memo. You know what I mean? And so when I was over there, I was reading books about men that Lester Sumrall was a great man of God. You know, you can get his teachings. It was Lester Sumrall was the one that I was into at the time. But there's about 3 or 4 of them. Lester Sumrall, Derek Prince. Those 2 men are already gone to be with Jesus. And Graham Cook. And he's still alive. But those are some of the basic foundational teachings of what I believe about the ministry of love.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And
just wasn't lining up is what I see.
But there was a lot of things that they absolutely did right. like preach the gospel, you know, and just be faithful and be willing to. And I didn't understand that, you know, and this is what slays me about Christian people, because if what you believe is so right, then why do you get offended by what somebody else believes?
Right. That's actually, it's interesting. I talk about this a lot, maybe not those words, and boy, did I love what you just said, because I was talking about this with a dear friend just yesterday, getting to the point where you just have to say, why does it matter if someone else doesn't believe practice the way I practice or believe the way I believe? Why am I offended by that? I shouldn't be. If I have that kind of conviction, if I'm out there in my life applying it in all these different dimensions, testing it, does it work? Is it true? And seeing fruit, then why? Why does that matter? They unfortunately, they're just going to have to go off and be, for me anyway, I'm getting better at it. They're just going to have to go off and be offended at me because I'm not going to stop practicing the way I practice, because I found my relationship. I found the garment, the garment that he placed on me.
But you are a conscientious person.
Sure.
You? Okay.
Yeah, I think
know
so.
You wouldn't be doing this if you didn't care about people.
No, I care about people. That's right.
And so therein lies the problem.
Yeah.
Because if you have, I'm going to just say it, if you have some type of aggressive, joy-stealing spirit, or masquerading as just an angry character, that they can steal your joy. And when you don't know any better, like I didn't, but with the Southern Baptists, I ended up having some great conversations. The pastor that I served with is a great man of God. He put his children in national school, taught them how to speak the Lithuanian language. Those children have led more people to Jesus than most pastors that I know locally, just by living their lives. And while the rest of the missionaries hid their kids away in these little commune type of deals, needing these retreat weekends to come together and have social interaction, his children had their own friends, because they could chop it up speaking Lithuanian.
Right. Actually go into the land and be able to build real relationships, just like you said. That's
so
the key.
That was scary to a lot of people in his organization, because he wasn't doing it like everybody else. But now his child plays in the symphony orchestra as a young man, and his daughter's going to graduate from Dallas Baptist University and about to be married, and those children are still living fruitful lives, and so is he. But there was just one or two things that we would process, and he was not one of the people that, we didn't necessarily agree with it, but we agreed to disagree, and I was able to serve with him, now watch this, and still believe what I believe, but honor what he wanted me to teach and how he wanted me to be.
I see. Yeah, sure.
because that's not compromising myself. But later, that when I would have a conversation, with some Pentecostals or some other charismatic or whatever, then they would, almost be angry at the Baptists because they don't want to go all the way in some certain spiritual gifts. And to me, it just and that's one of the things that I talk about in the book that I wrote. And it is the heartbeat. It's my heartbeat, because at the end of the day, let's say the trumpet blows in 5 minutes. Did we do everything that we possibly could to have unity in this community? I'm not even talking about right now, I'm just talking about Christian people, bro.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Right. No, yeah.
And I personally take it a step further, much like you do, meaning that if this person is doing good, walking a different path,
right, God
bless them. You know what? I might pray that Jesus might talk to them, because I'm worried about their soul, but I'm not going to condemn them. I'm not going to, I'm not going to ruin their day because they don't believe like what I believe.
I totally agree with that. Now that, I'll tell you right there, that's a big alignment for me, because you and I, for sure, because that I hold that very dear. That I find the high value in that. I mean, it's like one of those intersections. When I meet somebody who practices different than me, I don't become offended or repulsed. I'm actually, to be honest, I'm fascinated. I actually want to know more. I want to know what changed their life about that. I want to know, how did it manifest some big key things for me? How did it manifest love? How did it manifest mercy, compassion, forgiveness? Yeah, transformation, right. And wisdom. In what is bringing all those things, all those fruits of the Holy Spirit, right? How is what they're doing bringing that into the world? And to me, I just see people that way. I think we all are sort of, I don't know, I use the word like old tech, but I mean kind of like little radio receivers, and we can put that out in the world. We are the way that comes into the world. And what are you doing, or what is anybody doing for that to come into the world and be born? I think that's a beautiful thing. And when I focus on those things and less on the particulars, whether I'm talking to a variety of Christians or whether I'm talking to a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Jew, I love to find that out, because there's a root somewhere down in the ground, really, really deep. If we talk long enough, we all find common somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for most people, you know what I mean? Except, you know, for possibly some small percent, you know, minuscule part of the population that has either mental health or spiritual issues that do not want to change. And they, you know, which I have to say that because I've encountered such,
I have to. You're
such individuals.
Some hardened.
Yes, but most people, and even those people, man, I give them a chance and to try to change. Because,
well, I mean, have you ever soaked something? So, I mean, dude, I think about this all the time. All these, you know, you take a piece of leather, man, and you say that ain't never going to be soft again, man. But you soak it and you oil it and you give it some time and you work on it and you knead on it and you soak it, and then it'll be the softest piece of leather.
Okay, I have a vision and a dream to one day be able to have somebody come to me and say, let's say they're strung out on methamphetamines and smoking what's called mojo, which is like angel dust. They call it legal weed, and it absolutely destroys people, in which I'm witness to it all the time. But they come to me because, well, guess what? Most rehabs, you know, there's a procedure to get somebody taken care of. So that person would need some type of special detox, and then they would need 28-day treatment, and then they would need preferably faith-based or at least structured sober living to transition back into society. And the thing is once that happens, that individual can become unshakable. Because once you've stared death in the face, there's nothing you can say to me. I might hurt my feelings because I'm a conscientious person. I might need to take a walk as opposed to punching you in the throat. I might need to calm down and apply the things that I know. But at the end of the day, I'm going to shake back, and I'm going to go back to doing what I'm called to do, no matter what anybody says. But I feel like that if all the people in the community could come together and say, you know what, our community, you know, on the outside of town, we need to have a detox center. We need to have a rehab place that is run with all hands on deck. It's not run for Medicaid, Medicare kickbacks. It's not run from insurance premiums. It's run with people and volunteers and professionals that care about what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Isn't that a beautiful vision, man?
You know,
it really is.
You know, but to be able to do it from start to finish, and I think it can be done without competing with pre-existing places. I want it's my heart and the heart of freedom to partner with other organizations to make things happen. So, for example, the Washington Street Hope Center in Marksville, that is like a mom and pop 28-day inpatient facility, and we have had enormous success with people from our area that we've sent over there, and some of them are still in the sober living phase over there, but they're not just in sober living like some of the in Lake Charles. A lot of the sober living is structured to where you have to make a couple of meetings, but it's basically on you if you're going to succeed or not, you know, which ultimately it is. But with having mandatory intensive outpatient treatment, for X amount of time.
Yeah.
To where you are forced to deal with these issues and things of your heart. And but what I'm saying is, I feel like with all the churches in just this town, that there's no reason that what I'm talking about shouldn't already be in place, or with a little bit of love, a little bit of conversations, a little bit of sacrifice, that couldn't exist. Because I believe if God wanted to give it to just me, he would have done it already. I know I've still got some rough edges sometimes, and sometimes being passionate, and then people have told me that I have an intensity about what I believe in, and I do, but because with all that stuff that I lived through.
Sure. Well, it's a forging, man. I mean, it makes it sharper. I get it.
But it gives me a common ground, but but don't believe, listen, for anybody listening that wants to help somebody and love somebody, don't believe that you need to have experienced the exact same, that while that benefits the conversation and the empathy, it doesn't take away the human compassion or the love of God being demonstrated to another soul. As my mentor had never experienced, going to the psych ward or detox or getting arrested for public intoxication and narcotics and whatever else. He never experienced any of that.
Yeah.
But what he did was listen to me and pray for me and teach me how to walk like a real man of God. And you can do that, and you can do it from a distance. You can do it from listening. You can do it, without giving somebody $20. You can do it because the people that really are benefiting from it will appreciate it.
Yeah.
And don't, it's easy to get discouraged when you see some of the same people. You mean somebody wouldn't just change immediately when they meet you, Pastor Sean? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes 5 years. Sometimes it takes them being mad at me for 2 months and, telling everybody on the street I don't help them and whatever else and nobody loves me. And then when they finally decide that they want to go to rehab and they want to change their life, hey,
yeah,
you know where to find us.
It's kind of funny, man. It makes me think of something. This morning I was talking with my team, and I don't know how we got on the subject, but I even in our own lives, I guess I'll say it like this, even in our own lives, I mean, even if you're not, using drugs or alcohol, there's all kinds of other things that we do, little things we're apathetic about. And I was talking about that this morning. I said, I think for me in my life, I'm just kind of getting sick of myself. I'm getting sick of myself being apathetic about things that I care about, I care about litter. And so, it bothers me. It's always bothered me. And if we're really upon reflection, I go, this always bothered me since I was 20 years old. But how apathetic have I been in my life? Pretty damn apathetic.
Yeah, to not
like really go do something about it. It's easy for me to go, man, I'm sick of that. And then not do the damn thing. And so I was like this morning, I said, I'm getting sick of myself. I'm not sick of other people and their litter. I'm sick of myself.
And that's where
I got to go do it.
Well, with the spiritual foundation, that is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because, but without a spiritual foundation, it can shift into the guilt and condemnation and things that I was expressing earlier.
Drive you to act,
Yeah,
and do
to drive you to change instead of eating a sandwich and falling asleep.
Exactly. I mean, how many times it's so easy to look at other people and go, what I said this morning was like, hey, oh man, that guy he ain't using his blinker, man. I get sick of people around here don't use their blinker. I'm sick of that. Well, what about myself? Did I ever not turn my blinker on? Hell yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm sick of myself. If I'm sick of them, I'm sick of myself. I got to start really, every time something like that comes around, I got to quit saying I'm sick of that and then letting it end there. I need to say I'm sick of that and now I'm going to do a thing. And it's the more you do a thing after you say you're sick of a thing, the more it becomes like a natural impulse to go take an action and not just let it pass you by, I guess, and not change you. Let the feeling generate the action, essentially. Take it to the next, just a little bit into the next step,
I'm gonna share something with you a little bit off, because I do want to go back into the story and share about some of the things that are happening now. But I had to personally evaluate. I lived to be 43. People didn't think I was going to live out of my 20s, most assuredly. And then I've created, God used me to get this ministry off the ground. But I have an accountability board. We have 4 different locations. There's other churches that I partner with. It's not a cult of personality. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I would feel like if something happened to me and the ministry would fall apart, whether I went back to selling drugs or whatever, that I would have failed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that.
So I had to lean in and decide, am I doing what I would call kingdom ministry, which is, am I, the life that I'm living now and the things that I'm doing now, do they really reflect Christ? Am I doing that personally? And is Freedom Ministry of the South doing that? And so I've got these little points based off of people in the Bible and Jesus and the life of Jesus, which I think is one of the most more things we have to evaluate. But so I would ask, are you working together? Okay, like in the book of Acts, they sold everything they had and they worked together. But it was they didn't make everybody sell everything they had, just the people, their constituents, the people that were sold out for their cause. They made that sacrifice. And then everything, Jesus took 12 people and poured into them. He had a squad. And then kingdom ministry liberates the oppressed. So that means, and this is straight out of the Bible, in Hebrews it says don't forget those that are in prison. In James it says don't forget the widow and the orphan. In John 3, Jesus went out of his way, which my heart has changed, to go talk to a religious person in Nicodemus. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that is, I have to have endurance in that. I can't believe that I know the ultimate formula, because then that's like a paradigm shift and I'm the Pharisee.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
That's an awkward thought, ain't it? And then Mark chapter 5, you'd have the demonized man. There's mental health issues. He was cutting himself in the cemetery. All that stuff is still going on to this day. John chapter 4, the woman at the well. Okay, she was socially unacceptable. And then in John chapter 5, Jesus heals the man at the pool. Now, all of those people were socially unacceptable, except arguably Nicodemus, because he was a Pharisee. And then these points go quickly now. I just wanted to give personal examples. It does good. It does good seen and unseen with the right motives. Motives are everything. I call that the spirit behind it. And then it operates humbly. So the nature of Jesus is to serve, not to have everybody take care of him, where he washed their feet, like you said earlier. And then one of my favorite verses, it says, he came to serve, not to be served, and give his life for a ransom of many. And then it happens daily. And that's what we were talking about how do I get off track? How do I get set on fire at this retreat and then lose all my steam?
Right.
It's because of your daily. You could say, okay, wow, I went to this retreat and now I have 3 months clean. But if you don't learn how to come clean out your baggage, make a commitment to Freedom Ministry for a season so that you can heal and never go back.
Yeah.
Hey, I know Sulphur High football games are on Friday night, but would you rather stop gambling all your retirement away at the casino or come to church for 8 weeks?
You've got me thinking a little bit about something, a daily practice. And I don't know, for people listening, maybe other people do this, but this is something I do, and it's really my way of, honestly, trying to help my fellow man is trying to wrestle with things inside myself. I have to fix myself. And so I look at all these little things, and sometimes every day, most days, I will give myself something to wrestle with. Not to feel guilty over or to beat myself up about, but something that I know is repetitive, and I know that I really haven't arm wrestled with, and that I'm allowing it to sneak into my mind or my heart or my life. And it may not be so big that everybody in the world can see it, but for me it's insidious because it's small, and it sneaks in and takes me away from the thing I ought to do. You know
but
what
you
I mean?
know, yeah, but you know it's there.
And I know it's there. And so how can you help the world? I mean, hey, maybe you don't, maybe somebody listening doesn't feel like they can go help the world, but if you can find those little things and not beat yourself up over them, but wrestle with them and learn to wrestle with them. And the more you wrestle with them, you're going to get stronger at it. And you eventually, for me, I've overcome a lot of things. I don't talk to anybody about that. Just things that nobody knows.
Yeah.
That I wrestle with. Some of it's thoughts that I wrestle with, or some of it's habits, whatever it may be. You can defeat those things over time with some grace. I mean,
yeah, you can. And that's, you know, with that said, that's one of the, what we hope, you know, and then the stigma that we're trying to defeat of, you know, people want to call me the recovery pastor, you know, and I let them do that for the sake of, you know, communication.
Sure.
But I prefer to be called the freedom pastor.
Yeah.
You know, because,
I like that.
Because I don't want to, there's enough people that minister recovery. You know, I want to minister total freedom in Christ Jesus, that you can.
Freedom. I love it.
That you can change, that there is a better way. And so after Mexico, okay, that I came home, but before I went to Mexico, my daughter had just turned 18. Okay. And
now is this the daughter that you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And this is, you know, we're circling the plane back around right now.
Okay.
Because this is the, you know, the biggest deal in my life, honestly, personally. So I said, look, and I'm talking to the Lord, you know, that I'm gonna do this conference, and I'm gonna give it absolutely everything that I've got, and then when I come home, I'm gonna reach out to my daughter, because she's a woman now, you know, she's 18, and it doesn't matter from what I've learned, you know, ministering to women, ministering to all people truthfully, and understanding roots, and understanding about rejection, that it would be more healthy for me to receive rejection from her, and her to know that I honestly care, than to have her not receive anything from me and perceive that she's being rejected, because that would have been the absolute farthest thing from the truth. So I was praying about it, and you know, and then I came home from Mexico, and I was recovering from that, and I went to have coffee, and my mom makes the green drink that's super, you know, vegetables all juiced up.
Yeah.
And so I went over there to visit her, and I said, you know what, I'm fixing to reach out to her now. I feel like it's time. And then my mama said, I already did.
Wow.
And I said, oh, mama, you can't even let me handle my own business. But it is what it is, you know. And I was gonna do it anyway, and so, but I said, okay, you know, that's our personalities. We're very strong-willed individuals, and it's good that I'm following the Lord, and I get it. I got it from both sides, you know, from my mom and my dad. But so it was like in motion. I don't have any idea how that's going to turn out. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what perceptions of me have been painted, going from the way that I was before to the way that I am now. And like we said, now that could be even perceived bad. So I had all that stuff just floating around, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I know what I'm called to do. And so I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing and just see what happens, and just trust God. You know, he told me in 2005 he was going to take care of this. I'm not going to start flipping out about it right now. Well, I was on full-time staff at my church, and for about a week or 2 weeks, I felt like, because I had to be in the office a certain amount of time was part of my job description, you know, and there were things that I had to do and that I did that were normal stuff to maintain the church, and I was participating and handling all that stuff, but I really felt like my heart was outside. My heart was outside. I felt like I could have done what I was asked to do in about 10 or 12 hours, and I should have been in the community with the rest of the time.
I see.
Being the pastor, interacting with human beings. And I didn't think anything of it because I always wrestle with myself periodically. But I really felt like, man, and I can remember standing on the other side of my desk, looking at my desk and going, the action is not in here. And then I just kind of sat back down and started doing what I was doing. And I was having these feelings, and there was some other, like I said, it was a time of transition where we were receiving a new senior pastor, and everybody had their own agendas and own ideas about whatever, the church should be. And that's a whole nother subject. But for me personally, they said, hey, we need to talk to you. And so I was working with a gal from Cumulus Broadcasting, and we actually took the gathering over there and did the egg hunt with Steele from Rock 101.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That is a trip, dude. I mean, I don't want to chase that rabbit, but when they release the kids to get the eggs, dude, it's like Braveheart. I mean, they're just one. So it's really something to experience. I encourage you, no matter what you believe about Easter or whatever, that's something to see when those kids in Lake Charles, when the Cumulus egg hunt hits. But so we did that, and I was trying to help with the branding. So I thought I was going up there to talk about the radio ads and all this other stuff. And so this is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. But it shows me personally how much, like I was saying earlier, how much Jesus loves me too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So then they proceed to say, hey, the finances aren't here right now and whatever else. And so basically I'm being laid off.
Oh.
And yeah. And so look, I thought the meeting was about radio ads or whatever else, or maybe the brakes were going to get pumped on that and we were going to talk about something else. I really didn't know, because if I thought I was going to have a serious conversation with my pastor, I wouldn't have had my phone in my hand. But I still have my phone resting there on my inner thigh, and I'm having this conversation. And so, man, I'm just dumbfounded.
You're like, whoa, this isn't what I expected.
I honestly thought this was going to go the other way, and that I was going to get taken care of, and the other way I was going to get a raise or whatever. Yeah. And but I mean, not necessarily then, but that situation in general. And so, I was said, okay, and why, or whatever else. And then there's so many things, and I've heard people throughout my time in ministry say, I do this for nothing, and then the first time something happens they don't like, they take their toys and leave because the motive of the heart was wrong. Right. And a lot of people suffer in the Christian church from the felt led syndrome.
What is that?
It's when you feel led to do something when it's exciting.
Felt led, okay.
Yeah, and when you feel led to do something when it's exciting, but when it gets tough, you feel led to go on down to the church down the road. Or when somebody corrects you and you feel led to go ahead and leave because you're not ready to grow up. But when everything's Jim Dandy, you feel led to be part of that because it's exciting. And this faith walk thing is not always peaches and cream, but it's always worth it. And so I was just trying to take that, and I told my senior pastor, I said, look, I still believe you're the man for this job. But I didn't say that immediately. So right then, and I told you, I had my phone in my hand, my phone pinged, and I was like, well, I'm getting fired, so I'm going to look at it. Mm-hmm. And so I looked down, I just flipped it over, and it was my mother saying that your daughter wants to meet you.
Wow, man.
At the exact same time.
Wow.
And so that let me know, listen, man, because I put everything into and I still love my church. But that was tough, and I easily could have let my old man say some things that wouldn't have been from God in that moment, but that right there let me know that the Lord orders my steps, and that the steps of the righteous man are ordered by God. And it doesn't matter about the finances. It doesn't matter about a perception of my character or what somebody that may have said about me or to help create that situation. All that stuff is neither here nor there, and it really doesn't matter anymore, you know. And so I was able to look him in the eyes and tell him, you know, that I still believe that God picked you for this job, and that I'll talk to you Monday about what I can still do, you know, with, you know, the modifications that would have to be made in my own life. And then but these little chain of events is what set Freedom Ministry of the South in motion. So Lord knows I needed a break, you know what I mean? And so I'm sitting here and I'm wearing my Stranger Things shirt, and so I sat there on Netflix, you know, and watched 2 seasons of Stranger Things and just vegged out on the couch. But in between binge watching Stranger Things, God was speaking to me and giving me the vision of this ministry, and giving me the vision statement and saying, this is what I want you to do. This is out there. This is what it is. You know, it's not. This is those things on that paper, and so from there I drafted it all up, and then I went back, you know, a couple of weeks later, and I presented it to my pastor, and I said, hey, is it all right if I run with this? Do I have your blessing? And he greenlighted it. And so that's when my cousin came home from Mexico a few months later, as all this is unfolding, and we had an official launch, and the vision statement, mission statement, bylaws, and all that stuff. And I felt God's presence when I was finished writing that stuff and developing it. And then my nephew, who's also in ministry, Patrick Murray, and when he came over to take a look at it, you know, he said he felt God's presence all the way home, and I felt it strong like that as well for the first time to that degree in a long time, where it was like, this is it. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And much like my previous testimonies, there was a lot of adversity later. You know, in 2018 was one of the most difficult financial years that I've ever experienced in my life. But it's all worth it, you know. Yeah. And so when my cousin came home, so now there's a ministry going in Mexico that operates out of the same vision as what we had that was birthed at the gathering. And so then she had decided through relationship with people from the vineyard in Moss Bluff that had came to serve at the Freedom Conference, that she was going to go to church there. And so now they have a freedom ministry that's been running for 2 years plus in Moss Bluff, and it's amazing what's happening. For as they understand the vision, they're we do outreaches to that community, and now people from the Gillis Trailer Park area over there go to the Vineyard Church, and they're very well aware that there's a place they can go.
That's great, man. And so it's actually, I mean, you can set this up anywhere then, right? I mean, within different...
which is exactly why my chip on my shoulder had to get knocked off, because I have to be willing to have conversations with pastors and people in ministry that aren't like me, or that don't immediately have a heart for the broken, or maybe they do and they think it's too ugly of a ministry, or we don't want, God forbid, those people in our church. And I'm praying for those people. I'm no longer mad at them. You understand?
Yeah, no, I do.
Because if you're not doing the ministry off of the red letters, then I really don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, because you can get filled with outrage and not turn that into an actual good work, right? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like you could get outraged at those churches for saying, well, we don't want those people.
Absolutely.
And then your heart then becomes soured. I mean,
and then it's just, I'm like Tupac. It's me against the world. Right. All of a sudden, which was okay, and there was fruit that came from that, but God had to change that, and he had to morph my character. I learned how to do that well, but to do it with God is so much better. You know, because I'm not this smart.
Yeah.
You know, so this evolved into that. So now we had One Freedom in Mexico, One Freedom that was forming at the Vineyard, and then we always talked about one of the pastors I follow, Ron Carpenter. He would say, because he's from the Carolinas, so he would always say he would use a fictitious Ray Ray as an example. Okay, and you might know this Ray Ray. So all of a sudden, we were doing a youth conference because we did ecumenical ministry, which meant there were other churches there using our building to have the youth conference. Well, a friend of mine that I used to party with, Ray Vadrine, was going to Water's Edge, so he came to help with security. And then so my friend Jill, that staff at the gathering, she was like, "Look, Sean, it's the real Ray, like the Ray that we've been." The figurative Ray.
You actually get the real Ray.
We got the literal Ray here, and then we all got a trip out of it. And Ray was always smiling, and then he started coming to Freedom. Now he was already clean from drugs at that point, probably about 8 years already, but he was looking for something more. So he started coming to Freedom every Friday, and every Friday I talked about the outlines. And so then he approached me and he said, I would really like to possibly do something like this at Water's Edge. And I said, okay, because I always check people. Sometimes my method is pour cold water on somebody, and because if your fire's really lit, then my cold water's not going to extinguish it. Maybe that's not always the with people that are real tender, but it's not easy. This is not easy. And he said, I have every outline for the last 6 months, and that he had saved.
Oh, wow.
And I said, this is the guy.
Yeah.
And then we have, for the last 2 years, I had probably 15 ministry trainings where I'll teach you how to lead a small group. You know what I mean? Because we are all, apart from me getting a small stipend and some perks, we are completely volunteer based. Now, there's some people that are professionals in their own field or whatever.
Sure.
But everybody comes together to make it happen. So I can't pour into everybody because there's only one me in that capacity.
I see. Yeah.
So I try to assimilate whoever's serious and then pour into them, and then let them pour into everybody else. That's the way Jesus did it, and that's the way that I have to do it right now. But I do get one-on-ones with people. If you want a trip to rehab, then I have you in the car for a couple of hours. But right. So then that birthed the Freedom Ministry at Water's Edge on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. And then the Vineyard Moss Bluff is on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Okay, and so then our ministry it's still the Gathering. I'm still a member of the Gathering, but the city bought our building. So, I had some friends of mine from a friendship that's going about 2.5 years now, Pastor Steve Stark at the Rock Church.
Okay, and where's that at?
That's on Carbide Drive off Swisco Road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if you get on Carbide Drive, you can't miss it.
I see.
There's a big sign.
I think I've seen it out there when I go.
Yeah, he's real active on social media and inviting people. And they have like a jamming band, and that's how like his band came to play at our ministry, and then he asked me to come preach at his church on Sunday, and we've been friends ever since.
Okay.
And that's how that started. So Freedom Friday now meets there. And so but one more interesting thing happened is when I was on full-time staff, I was fascinated about the concept of planting ministry, is what this would be called in Christianese. Franchising out, I guess, what it would be called in the world's terminology. But that Hackberry has lots of problems in Hackberry.
Yeah.
With drug addiction and tragedies and grief and all kinds of things like that. And there was a good friend of mine that helped start our class that we do for probation people because her son passed away from a tragic incident, and she knew that when he was in treatment that he was reading The Purpose Driven Life. So so she wanted to help get that started, and that class still runs to this day.
Really?
You know, from 2011 or so. It's been that's been running for a while, but we modified it and call it something else. But it's still I'm still in partnership with misdemeanor probation. But this lady is affiliated with a church in Hackberry, and she was bothering the pastor, and she was bothering me, saying that we need a Celebrate Recovery in Hackberry. And they were really going through some transition, which is, you know, it's not always the best time to implement change when
there's already
a little turbulence. And but I had a heart for it, you know, and I've had a heart for Hackberry, because I've you know, when I partied with everybody. You know what I mean? There's one thing about racism that my dad taught me when I was a young kid, and he said that you know, racism is only for those that are ignorant and too weak to think for themselves and make a personal assessment of each individual. And I was just like, oof, you know what I mean? And that stuck with me.
Dude, good on you, Dad, for sharing that.
You know, so it didn't matter, you know. But because of that, I had friends all over. You know what I mean? And I did it in the negative way when I was a drug dealer. You know what I mean? I was in the hood. I was in the rodeo people. I was selling drugs and partying at the raves, at the bonfires, at the whatever, with, you know, any kind of thing going on. So I take that same thing that God gave me now, and I use it for good. And so because of that, I had friends in Hackberry and all different areas. And so one of my friends in the Hackberry church said, hey, they're having a revival. And this was probably last year, and or transitioning into 2018. I'm trying to think, or the end of 2018. I'm trying to piece it all together on a timeline. But he invited me, and so I was counseling somebody on a Wednesday night at my house. I was already in relationship with them. I felt comfortable enough to do that, and that went long, but it was good. I felt good about it. But it was like 6:17 or 13. And church started out there at 6:30. I was like, well, you know, I'm going to be late. There's no sense in trying to go. And I just felt this pressed in my spirit, go. And then, man, it was horrendous weather. It was like I was driving in a hailstorm. And then I almost turned around at Fisherman's. But then I challenged myself and said, you know, how far would you go if you were partying? If, you know, if there was a woman out there, if there was some drugs out there, if there was whatever, you would drive through a tornado. You know, we'll get some twister going on. And so I just kept going. And so then when I got there, I was like 30 minutes late, and the church service just started on time. They ended up having problems, and so I got there exactly on time. And then at the end of the service, Monty Rouse is the senior pastor, and the guy, he was brought in town to do the revival. At lunch that day, there was a shift, and he said, I want this ministry at my church.
Wow. At
lunch that day, on a Wednesday. And at the end of the service, he announced it. He didn't verbalize it, but in his mind, while he's talking to this guy, he said, I know this. They call me the long-haired pastor, or the little guy, you know, that I know this guy that with the gathering, and we're going to do this.
Wow.
And so he made his mind up with no communication between us whatsoever, and then made an announcement. And then I walked up to him, and I said, at the end of the service, and I said, hey, my name's Pastor Sean from down in Sulphur. And he just shook his head and was beside himself. And he said, did you hear what I just said? And I said, yes, sir, I did. And he goes, well, I was talking about doing that with you.
Wow.
And so ever since then, you know, and there's a difference between pastoral support and pastoral backing. And he does the backing, which is, for example, if AA said, can we borrow this building to have a small meeting on Tuesday, and you gave them the keys and maybe put some coffee out for them, and that they would clean up and lock it, you wouldn't have to participate in it,
right?
But you would be supporting it,
right?
You know, you give them a shout out, that's supporting it. But the backing is when you're hands on, you're financially in it, and you you yourself are in the trainings or coming to the meetings or whatever. And so he immersed himself into doing that, and God is doing an amazing work. And we had our first outreach party November 3rd in Hackberry.
Really?
Yeah, where people from all these different churches, from Moss Bluff, Lake Charles, Sulphur, and just like some of my core team made the sacrifice, well in advance to skip church and come out there at 6 o'clock in the morning and smoke and grill pork loins and just lay out to where when their church service ended, that they could come to the park and fellowship. But it was an open invite to the entire community as well. But what I really wanted to do is to serve those people.
Yeah.
To serve that church and then franchise out from that into the rest of the community.
Yeah.
And that was amazing.
That is amazing.
And so now we have 4 meetings, and so that meeting is on Thursday night at 6:30 at First Baptist Hackberry. So now we got that, and then we also have men's weightlifting, which a guy graciously lets us meet at his house in a 30 by 30 garage, which I was terrified that I was going to lose all my weights when the city bought the building, because one of my friends that's a bodybuilder helped donate,
Oh, okay. Over the building.
Yeah, actually, dude, the old school Olympic gym.
Oh, yeah.
His name's Tim Kelkris, and he got second place at last year.
It's a jiu-jitsu place?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. It's half jiu-jitsu and half weightlifting.
Okay.
And when they did the jiu-jitsu, I'm gonna say jiu-jitsu takeover, but it's only it's half the gym. But when they had to part with a whole lot of their old equipment, and it was in storage and just sitting there. And when I was selling used cars and collecting a stipend from doing Celebrate Recovery, I approached somebody to make an offer on all of it, and I was going to buy it out of my own pocket.
I see.
And then in 2017 or 16, the Lord just gave it all to me.
Wow, man, that's great.
Yeah, and we've been using it for, and that all started because somebody on probation had an ankle bracelet, and they said, I can only go to work and I can only go to church. I can't go meet you at the gym.
Oh.
And so we had a weight bench. It started with a weight bench and a couple of dumbbells, and then there's been amazing things happen through that ministry, and just friendships and relationships that happen through there. All we do is work out, and at the end of the night just say a prayer and encourage each other through whatever we're going through.
That's great, man. And that's all you need. Really, for some people that's it. I mean, they got that touch point. And
you absolutely especially I always talk about the first year of somebody's healing or somebody's recovery, because that's the time where you're kind of fragile.
Yeah.
And so that's why we like to have options of every day of the week. And but on the website it'll say Freedom Meetings, and then it'll say other faith-based.
Okay.
So the other faith-based are not just, I didn't just hit Google and put those on there. Those are people that I know personally.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Because I wouldn't send somebody to a questionable place.
So help me understand this, and for the listeners too, because honestly, people listen to this, that you never know who's listening to it.
Amen.
This might be the thing they need to hear. So they go to if somebody wants to get into one of your recovery ministries or experience that, and they feel like they're ready, what's their step? Do they go to the website first and they reach out to you through the website? Do they find a meeting? How does that work?
Well, because that we're a mobile we will get back with you no matter what. But the best thing that anybody can do is show up.
Yeah, just find the day, time, location.
Find the one that you can show up at, and then you can connect with whoever's facilitating or leading that meeting.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Our contact information is all over the website. For example, sometimes you might not even need to talk to us necessarily. There's but we will help you through it. But what I'm saying is there's a resource tab on the website, because if Bubba or Ray decides they're ready to go to treatment, they don't, you hit Google, and then whoever's pinged it for whatever different reason, that's the information that's going to show up first. That's not always the best way to go. You know what I mean?
No, it makes sense. You'll find the wrong one, Well,
I mean, yeah, and there's too many different dynamics, and I'm not, and some of them would deal with different types of medication and things of that nature, which whatever makes you better, whatever gets you closer to your healing, but I'm not a big proponent of that. And there's also the danger of patient brokering, where somebody could send you to a different rehab that's mediocre so they can collect money from the state.
I see.
Or the government in some kind of way. And I hate to even put that out there, but the places that are on the list on the website are places that we've worked with hands-on.
I see.
You know, that I brought somebody there. I know somebody on the staff.
You kind of curated a specific list that you feel...
Yes, and then you can go there, and if all of those places that are on the website, if they happen to say no, we don't have a bed, because that's like the first question. You got a bed? You got a, can I get somebody in today? Because you don't want somebody detoxing on your couch.
Right.
Sometimes it can be dangerous.
Sure.
It can be physically dangerous. It can be literally dangerous. It can be emotionally dangerous, scary. It can be medically dangerous, like for an overdose. Some things you shouldn't come completely off of. And that's where I believe the medicine and stuff in the inpatient facility can help you. But if you're still taking medicine 7 years later, and I'm not talking about mental health medicine. I'm talking about switching seats on the Titanic, which I'm not a big proponent of. So these places that are on the list are more towards the cognitive side. There are some that are what they call dual diagnosis, which is your addiction and mental health, because that is a lot of, that was part of the reason that I was drove. Is because of my unhealthy mental thinking habits mostly.
Yeah.
And
sure.
And sometimes the conditioning, but all those numbers are on there. There's also, for example, food pantries, local food pantries in this area, and there's also sober livings. So there's detox, rehab, sober living, and the local food pantries, and then every body that we're in relationship, far as the meetings go. And there may be some other meetings, like I know Living Way Pentecostal in Lake Charles, they're developing some a CR meeting, and they're going to be doing a women's house. I don't know if it's strictly reentry, but it's been a wild journey.
Yeah, No, I'm fascinated by it. I love the whole story because of all the ways it circles back over and over again, to something that happened to you in the past. You've had enough time and experience for that to circle back around and have meaning again,
And I'll tell you this too, is after the Lord put my daughter back in my life, to where now we have a relationship, and we've met several times in person and communicate periodically through social media. Okay, first I wasn't talking about it very much. You know what I mean? Just because I wanted to make sure she was all right with it before I talked about it. And but I felt like especially people that were coming to the ministry, because man, you lose your kids, the state gets your kids. You lose the right to see your kids, because if you're in active addiction, you're sick. You know what I mean? You're struggling. You're drove by the enemy, and some people were in the process of, hey, I've had this job at Turner. I'm getting a lawyer, and I'm about to fight for not to attack my spouse, but I'm going to fight for the right, because we help people through that process, And so, listen, after God did that for me, he started to do it for at least 5 people that were in the ministry, where they got reunited with their children.
Wow, man. So you got to see that again.
I got to see it reciprocated.
Yeah.
And that's what a testimony is. It's a license to encourage other people.
I like that. I like
You
that.
know?
Yeah, a license to encourage other people.
It is because we can argue theology, we can argue this, and you can not agree with that. But I'm sitting here and telling you what happened to me.
Yeah,
and that's an absolute fact.
yeah. That I love that. That's what I love about people telling their stories, man. I mean, I always find that no matter what you believe, no matter what I've believed, because I've held fast to different things and they've evolved over time throughout my life. We all do that, I think. But when you hear somebody's firsthand story and you believe them, and it crashes against or through something that you hold dearly, that you've put in a glass container and sat up on a shelf and spit shined, and you look at it every day and it's in that perfect little place.
Your grandma gave it to you.
Yeah, that's where all your beliefs are. It's where everything you hold fast to is. Don't touch it, don't mess with it, keep it clean, keep it safe. And then somebody has a personal first-hand story, comes along, and it's like, oh man, that just knocks that thing off the shelf. You know, and not just because they're passionate about it either, because that can be tricky.
Yeah.
Because people can be passionate about some pretty terrible things.
And not know any better.
Right. But when you hear that testimony like that and you go, look, I always just go, look, I might hold fast to this thing I've put on the shelf up here, but I'm also willing to take that thing that they've got and set it up on the shelf there right next to it because I believe them. Do you know what I mean by that? I don't necessarily always say, hey, it's not going to supplant or take the place of everything that I hold dear to, but I'm fully willing to put a little glass container of their story right there next to it and put it in the same equal standing with what I hold dear to as well. I'm not saying that about your story necessarily, but I'm willing to do that because that's the beauty of the variety of humanity, man. I mean, we all have so many different experiences. I mean, you can sit and talk to people and go, oh, yep, I agree, I know, yep. But then sometimes you sit with somebody and you go, man, ain't none of that happened to me.
Yeah,
I didn't have any of those experiences.
And this is what I believe that the Christian church needs to learn more than anything else is that you can love somebody without agreeing with them.
Right. Sounds so simple to say it, but it's true. You can.
Yeah, I mean, and for some people, it's about the deprogramming of atypical religious mindsets or whatever, because that is religion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That is learned behavior. That man was taught to witness in a certain way. He was taught to use a certain 4 or 5 scriptures, and you know, and it's sad. Because,
it is sad,
because
man.
You know, I believe that we should be eating our ribs.
It's interesting because you know, I don't know if you know, but I'm a vegetarian. It's funny that you've been telling that story.
No.
And but at the same time, this is interesting because, and I'll segue a rabbit here about that. I was a vegetarian in my 20s, and I'll tell you why. And people are going to laugh when they hear this, and I don't care. I've told it to different people privately, but I've always, even since I was in my 20s, for me, the country roads are my temple, man. I mean, that's where I go to commune with God. The sunrise in the mornings, the fog in the pastures, the sound of the cows, birds coming to life.
Yeah.
My heart just unfolds in those moments, and that's just where God's always touched my life. And so one day I was in the 20s, you know, walking out in the country, sun's coming up, and I was hearing those cows and this young calf. I stopped and looked at it through a barbed wire fence, and I stood there, I don't know how long, an hour, 2 hours, and I just sat there and stared at that calf. And man, I just started crying, and my heart quivered, and I just said, you know, I don't know that. It wasn't even so much about that I thought consuming animals was wrong. I got this big picture in my head of the whole, I guess, the machine of agriculture and how so far we've become so far removed from the meals we eat. It was like this big feeling of...
It was an epiphany.
It was an epiphany. Yeah, it was a big feeling that was bigger than just... oh, I don't eat meat. It was just like, no, I think I need to remove myself from this system so I can learn to appreciate the life of creatures again. That was just what it was. It had nothing to do with anything but that. And so I just went home, and I remember my mom cooked a meal that night, and she always cooked fried chicken and stuff. I said, Mom, I'm not going to eat that. I'll eat the mashed potatoes or whatever. And she's like, what's going on? And she said, I don't know. I'm going to try being a vegetarian. And so I did that for probably 6 or 7 years. When you're a vegetarian, you're the only vegetarian in your family.
Yeah, it's tough.
It was very tough. And so I got married and I had kids, and my wife wasn't a vegetarian. She didn't cook vegetarian meals. And so maintaining that became harder and harder. So as time went by, I slowly would sneak a piece of sausage here and there out of a gumbo bowl. And then before long, I started realizing, hey, you know what? You're really not a vegetarian. You can't say that anymore. So I laid it down for years and years. Because it had I guess the way to put it, man, it had become a thing that I had put on a shelf. It started out as a real spiritual thing, and it had become a thing that I had put in a glass case on the shelf. Then it was, oh, Oran's a vegetarian. Well, we got to do something special, make sure he's got something special because he's a vegetarian. It's kind of like saying, well, don't cuss around that person because they're Christians. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? I had become like, I was a different color than everybody else.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be a different color than everybody else. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but ultimately what I came to realize when I readopted it recently, it come from walking on those country roads again and just finding my heart. And I said, I really do believe for me that this is the right thing. I don't mean it for everybody, but for me in my spiritual life right now, that's what I need. But the thing I've acquired in the last 20 years was that I no longer place it on the shelf. And I loved your rib story because now, like at Thanksgiving, I go, look, maybe everybody didn't cook vegetarian meals. I don't ask them to. No, I ain't even tell nobody I'm a vegetarian. I go and I eat graciously. And if someone cooked a meal of a beast, I eat, respectfully, I eat that beast now. But I don't make it my choice if I have a choice. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so I guess it was interesting when you brought that up and used it as an example. I was like, he probably doesn't realize how much it means to me personally, the way you express that, because I was like, yes, this is exactly the way I feel about this too. Like, I don't go out into the world now and go,
I'm a vegetarian.
Ding, ding, ding. And everybody should, the machine and the agriculture industry and all this, and the deforestation. I don't go out there waving my fist. I have my reasons for it, and they're reasons that matter to me, but I can't run out in the world and start dripping that all over everybody else. And then looking down from my little shelf in my glass box.
Yeah, but it never fails that usually when people get the epiphany that they do that, whether it's the Holy Spirit, whether it's whatever it is, that when you really feel that way, you're fired up about it and you want to tell somebody.
Right.
And a lot of times that we don't have a lot of wisdom in those moments, but it doesn't mean that over time that somehow, some way, God won't use it for good or to plant a seed or get somebody to think about it.
Well, it's funny, full circle things. I love talking about full circle things because I chuckle at my 20-year-old self. I chuckle at now at 45 when I go back to you said something way back at the beginning of this. What was you said, your salvation experience or your salvation moment in the 80s? I don't remember the exact word you used, but I cued in on that because I was like, oh yeah, I know that I have a similar experience. I know where I was when it was. In fact, today is December 3rd, and it's related. It's not the day, but it's a holy day for me today because it's related to that original experience. But it's funny how you can have all these experiences when you're young, and you're so on fire. Because I can remember, man, God, I remember just being doused in gas and lit on fire after that experience, and running around telling everybody about it. And then, you get two and a half decades of other things that happen. But now it's funny because on Sunday mornings when I get up and I go out into the country to pray and I see those cows and the fog on the land, all the same stuff, it's like almost like a joyous, not a joke, that's not the right word, but there's some comedy in it and good, healthy, wholesome chuckle. at myself, both versions. And so this older version of me kind of smiles through time at the younger version of me, if it makes any sense, and goes, we have a lot of space between he and I, but we're friends now. It's like I'm finally getting to where I'm making peace. And I always hope if I live another 20 years that I'll be able to do that again, have a 65-year-old version of me, have a couple of decades between the guys sitting here at this table and chuckle at some of what we're talking about.
Because, I think, I don't know, man, I just had a weird thing come in my head. But when I was younger, that I wanted to stay the same, and that was part of my problem. For example,
interesting, yeah.
I wanted the Beastie Boys to keep making albums like License to Ill. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for all that other stuff.
That's so funny, man.
Because and this is a trip, because they were growing and evolving, and I was not.
I get it, man.
Dude, I mean, is that a trip?
It's funny that you bring them up, because about them, I don't have the same relationship, but I had the same feeling for years. I would go, man, I don't know. This stuff just doesn't sound like License to Ill, and that's what I cut my teeth on, and I just couldn't get into it. But then, not even just 2 months ago, I was watching something, and the song Intergalactic started playing, and I'd never heard it. Ever. Crazy. I was like, I'd kind of always stayed in the License to Ill zone.
Yeah, exactly.
And I heard Intergalactic, and I was like, I Shazammed it, because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, Beastie Boys, how did I never hear this? And I went back, and so I've been listening. It's funny, man. I've been listening to this
I actually picked
body
up,
of work.
Yeah, I picked up their second or third album with What You Want. Because I bought it at Goodwill.
Yeah.
But because I never gave it a chance.
God, me either. I was the same way. It's so funny, and it's a really recent memory for me, because my son was like, "Oh, I know this song." I'm going, "How does my son know this song?" And in the junior high, the Beastie Boys is kicking it with, License to Ill, and I just shut down after that. I was like, "Oh, this is like you said. I didn't change." And now I'm 45, and I'm going, oh, there's all this flavor that I just totally missed out on because I wasn't allowing myself to. I like the smile on your face. We're having this moment right now. And it's kind of funny.
Yep. That's how I put everything on a timeline too. Is the music.
I like that
because that's my creative, creative nature and everything. And I never bought an album before there was Google. Okay, I'm gonna confess, a lot of people know this already, but there was a little bar behind Bonanza.
I know where it's at. Yeah, where it was.
Yeah, called Shooter's Pub.
Shooters, yeah.
Okay, and when I was, selling drugs or hanging out or whatever, or even in the Depression time, before I left, that I was hanging out at Shooters, and people would call that phone and ask to talk to me. And it wasn't always because they were trying to score or something or whatever. They would call me and they would say, what was the movie where Al Pacino was blind? Or what, and they would say, or what was the movie where this? Or can you tell, look, we're sitting here at a party and we need you to tell us.
That you were their lifeline.
Right. I'm gonna settle the argument about what was that Led Zeppelin song really about. What was he trying to say? Or that, and then I would have to tell them, no, look, you got to interpret the lyric like this, and it really means that.
That's funny. Yeah. I love that, man. That's funny that we have a relationship in that way, because I find that about movies too, because I grew up in a video store, man. I mean, so you end up with all this like useless, like dense knowledge about weird, obscure films.
Wait, dude, we used to have to wait. There was no IMDb or whatever it is. We used to have to wait until like the show was over, like even on USA, up all night or whatever you were watching, and then sometimes you're waiting so you can see who that was. In the credits, and then sometimes on the pay cable, they do like this, and the movie ends, and they go, and the credits are done, and you can't even. I'm like, man, I stayed up a whole nother hour
just to
see the credits that TBS just speeded through with no respect.
Yep. It's funny. I was just talking about this with my children the other day, how the world has changed. We're getting way in we're in a rabbit hole now.
Yeah, we're in the hole.
That's okay. That's good. I like it. this is a comfortable one for me for sure. But yeah, I was telling my son, we were talking about movie trailers, you know, and because there's like 10 movie trailers before a movie comes out, and I'm trying to teach myself to stop watching that stuff because I really do miss the surprise, you know. And one movie, there's two actually that happened to me that I can really viscerally recall, and it was E.T. and Predator. And I was telling my oldest boy, I said, well, when I was a kid, I was real little when E.T. came out. I said, but I do remember the trailer coming on TV. And you only got like one, and you had to catch it during, it was a commercial, you know. So, I mean, if you're a kid and you happen to catch the trailer, you might only see that thing one time. And so whatever you caught, that's what you know about that film if you're a kid by the time you get to the theater. And I remember seeing the E.T. trailer in this kid going up to a garage and a ball rolling in, and then there was this hand, and it was ugly.
Yeah.
I thought it was a horror movie. I really did. And so when my dad took us to see E.T., I thought we were going to see something scary.
Yeah, you didn't plan on crying.
No. And so it was like, oh, it was a surprise, and there was this sort of emotion. So because it strips away my notion, I was able to receive it differently. And with Predator, it was the same way. I knew who Arnold Schwarzenegger was. I'd seen Terminator. I knew he was an action star. And so the trailer I saw of Predator was like guys in the jungle with guns. I'm like, I've seen this before. It's like every other thing. So my dad says, hey, let's go see this movie Predator. He was older than me, so I'm assuming he probably knew a little bit more. I had zero indicator for me that this was a science fiction movie. So that's another movie that it hit me in a whole new way, because when I got there, I was like, okay, cool, I've seen it. We're going to see some guys fighting with guns in the jungle. What? There's a invisible thing?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like
It was groundbreaking at the time.
It hit me in a way because of my notion was completely destroyed. I'd already made up my mind. I knew what I was going to see, and it just blew me out of the water. And these days, for me, I find that just rarely happens anymore. I'm like, I can almost just go, I don't know, nothing shocking, because we've seen practically everything about it before it even, the first trailer airs. They've already got...
I have a hard time when I do go to the movies because I don't want to see the trailer.
Yeah.
I'm weird because often I can dissect pivotal parts of the movie, because sometimes they'll put the best part or the comic relief part on the trailer.
Yeah.
You know, and when I was still watching crude comedies, for example, they had Tropic Thunder or whatever, and they showed Lord forgive me, and they showed that little Asian child or whatever it was.
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That he's like, you're coming with me and all that stuff, but it showed him stabbing him, and while Ben Stiller's running, and the guy's the child's attached to him on the trailer.
Yeah.
And when I saw the movie, and he's telling him, you know, you're gonna escape with me, we're gonna make it, and all this, and then I knew already that he was going to turn on them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that ruined what would have been one of the most hilarious things I'd seen in a while.
Yeah, right. The twist is already stripped out of it.
And that's just part of why I don't do the trailers, because I'm going to watch it or I'm not.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting that way. I'm guilty of of in the past, especially the last decade, of just kind of anything that came out about something I was excited about, just absorbing it. But I'm trying to get to where I don't do that anymore, because I'm recalling those feelings, and I'm going, you know, I want that again. I want to be surprised by something, you know. Even if it's not the best movie, I still want to have some of that feeling of, ooh, I really just don't know what's going to happen. You know, that's part of the joy. Well, isn't that just like life? I mean, part of the joy of being alive is not knowing. I mean, through all the suffering and pain and the hard things that you've shared today. Yeah, I mean, you see some people, there's people who would go, oh, absolutely, I wouldn't want to go through all that. But man, if you'd have already known all of that, is it potentially your ministry wouldn't be alive today? Potentially.
Yeah, that's mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
and it's
really
a lot of pain, but
because you know, this is one of the things that I strive to maintain my joy. now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it is extraordinarily tough. But I don't, it's an old saying, I don't got to do this. I get to do this.
Yeah.
You know what I
right.
mean? So
Yeah.
so the things that I do in order to help this keep going, for example, not take a job at Sasol working 12s where I could ultimately get on my feet and get exactly, whatever it is that my physical desires would be, that instead I take jobs spottedly, in the stipend salary and some of the perks, so that I can bring somebody to rehab.
Yeah.
So that I can minister at a funeral or whatever. And while, being an empath and being gifted in that way, it's for a reason, that before I just thought I was bananas.
Man. Another thing, you and I sensed it when you walked in this room, man, that word empath. I only just recently started really accepting that for myself, because my poor wife, she's been such a saint in my life, because she's had to endure a lot listening to me. And listening to me is an endurance for sure, because I can go on and on. But yeah, I've struggled with so many things, like relating to people, for instance. A lot of what you said about, remember how when we first started talking off pod, we were talking about being introverts, and I told you about social anxiety, and a lot of people who've listened to this show, I've talked about that a lot. But in the last few months, I've come to realize that perhaps that social anxiety wasn't really coming from some kind of mental triggers that I had. It was actually coming from the fact that I don't know how to shut this is the way I've been trying to word this, because it makes sense for me visually. I don't know how to close my wings to protect my heart when I need to. I go into a room full of people and my wings are wide open, and I leave that room. I enter that room and I'm feeling what's in that room, and then when I leave that room, I carry it away with me, because I close my wings after I leave the room, and then I go home and it's in me. And so I've been taking other people's stuff with me for years, ever since I was a little kid. And that's where some of those feelings have come from. For me, at least in an empathetic way, I've had to learn that that's what's really been going on with me. Now that I'm aware of it, and I enter into even sitting at this table, I can do it in a healthier way.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, it's...
Because I would leave here today in the past after our conversation, and all I'll think about is you, probably for 2 weeks. But I may have another conversation 3 days from now at this same table, and so it was just this leapfrogging effect of if you had, especially if you had pain you had today, and it wasn't positive, and you were just leaving a lot of pain at the table, I'd take that home with me, and I'm going to take it into every meeting I go to. It's going to be in my mind. It's not my pain, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so I would just go, I'd leave, honestly, man. I'm going to be totally full disclosure. I'd go off and just go cry.
Yeah, well, I mean,
but
that's still growth.
It is.
It really is, because a lot of times if you don't do that, if you don't process in a healthy way, that it'll bleed out in some other kind of way.
Oh, for sure. It would turn into other things, and I wouldn't know what it was. Maybe even unhealthy eating, not sleeping.
Yeah, and that's where the anxiety stuff would get me, and especially not walking with the Lord. That when my friend was killed, that I had a lot of blessings around me.
Yeah.
And I can remember, the first Christmas after that happened, and the people around me, and my girlfriend especially, bless her heart, at that time, they wanted me to go on and do the normal stuff, and be the fun guy, the person closer to the person that I was supposed to be, and I just couldn't do it, because I was like, what is his mom going through right now?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
You were all about her pain.
Yeah, and then I was self-guilt of how could I not have been there and one way or another, I wouldn't be worried about this right now.
Yeah. It's interesting, man.
And you would get stuck. So, but now, but listen, if I didn't care about, and this may be a season, I may plant this, or I really feel like I have years more to finish building this ministry to get it stronger. But if you don't care about people, then you can't be doing this.
Yeah.
And I've heard people try to say, well, you just need to separate that. And right. Well, good luck. It doesn't, that's not how it does for me, because right. I'm not just a pastor so I can do somebody's wedding to keep my lights on right. or pay for my Suddenlink. You know what I mean? I don't do that, man. I won't do things that I don't feel good about. I don't get a confirmation from the Lord that I should be involved in. But for example, if someone dies of a drug overdose, and if they were involved in the ministry and we know them and we know their family, then you could say, oh wow, you got to deal with all of that. But no, I have the privilege of stepping in there and talking to my friend's mother, where this stuff 20 years ago or even 15 years ago used to destroy me. Yeah. And I used to experience cataclysmic shifts in my character where I could, in the beginning, step up and do the ministry, if you will, step into the crisis situation, comfort everybody, and do all of that stuff. And then when it was over, I need to peel myself. God, you know what I mean?
Man, dude. You're speaking so much truth to me right now, because if anybody that knows me will say that about me, they're like, oh, you're better in a crisis. And I've always noticed that about myself. When other people were in trouble, I'm better then. I get clearer. My wife would tell you, she's like, it's like you almost calm down. Like, I go, well, yeah, it's like all of a sudden the world looks super clear to me. There's people that need help. There's people that need love. There's people that need this. I can go and just sink into all of that, and all of a sudden it's like everything gets super clear. The problem is, though, when you said that word cataclysmic shifts, I would leave those situations and be wrecked later. It was later I would be just like, I'm completely depleted, all done.
Which some of that is normal for an introvert to recharge. Mm-hmm. But the thing is that if you can't be the man that you're called to be for your wife, right, after you're doing that, right, then you have to find some type of way to let the Lord give you balance, right, in doing that, because that's where I would go wrong. Is I would give everything I had to everybody else, and then have be on fumes to love my own family, and then I would give somebody on drugs 5 chances. They've burned me in several different directions, right? But this cousin or whatever it is that my sister's doing, I don't seem to be able to tolerate that, right? And that's
no, I get it, man.
So for me, that was wrong. That now I have to not be afraid to go into those situations and still do the exact thing before, but now it's more of the communion that I have with the Holy Spirit afterwards, is that I can say, we did that. I got to do that. I did that with God. And so that when I am laying down that night, and if I do weep, or if I do hit my knees and pray for those people, that I'm released from their burden, but I shared in it. Yes. And that is the difference.
Yes. And man, I love it. Yes, exactly. And it's beautiful.
I don't have it in front of me, but it's one of the focal point scriptures of the book that I wrote in the whole entire ministry. Okay, it's in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and it says that we let God, the God of grace, the Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, and the Father in heaven, and the God who gives us all comfort, and He comforts us in our troubles, so we in turn can comfort others with the same comfort that we receive in Christ, which means that basically that type of love should be reciprocated.
Yeah, it's meant to be given, meant to be shared.
Yes, and it's meant to be given back.
Well, look, man, I mean, even like I mentioned that earlier today about what today means to me, and I really haven't had much time today to really sit and reflect. I'm going to put that for my evening reflection, but today's a special day, December 3rd, and it's the birthday of somebody who did that for me, and they're a critical component to my salvation story, my awakening. The initial spark comes from that person reaching out to me and sharing, and that was one of the lessons I learned on that day 25 years ago was I'm giving you a gift, but that gift, even though it's for you, you have to use your life now to go give that to other people. You have to give it away. You can't just hoard that. And there's been a lot of pain from giving that away.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately worth it.
Yeah, it's worth the cost.
Yeah.
It
totally.
Absolutely is. And I also, I had to come to the realization that a lot of people, believe it or not, they're not like me.
Right.
And that's okay.
Right.
Everybody needs to make a difference in the way that they're called to make a difference, but I just firmly believe that if you're a Christian, that we should find a way to get along under the name of Jesus, and that all those things that I rattled off earlier, we should find a way to implement them, as far as the kindness and compassion and humility, and that looks different for each person sometimes, but it also needs to be in motion.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are stuck because they're not doing anything with what they've learned.
Yeah.
And there is an element of what's going to happen. For example, if I say I'm having a community outreach, well, what am I going to do? Like some people, like for me, it's like, okay, you come out there and I'm going to throw you in the game. Well, some people need to know I'm showing up at 9:15 and I'm going to cook hot dogs. They need to know what their task is or for their personality type.
Sure.
And so now, we were ready for that.
Yeah.
Now it's just a little bit of slight modifications. But basically if you show up to a community outreach, we will put you in the game, but we'll take care of you. And there's people there that you can just join in with whatever's already happening.
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to go out there and I'm going to make you say your testimony while I'm cooking hot dogs, unless we've talked about it, prayed about it, and scheduled it or whatever.
Not gonna surprise anybody.
Yeah, I'm not. That's not my heart.
Yeah.
And the thing is some people that are conditioned in the church, they might say, well, he has a Slayer t-shirt on, that guy, what am I, and this person over here, and that gal's dressed provocatively, and these people are smoking cigarettes right next to the booth and whatever. I'm like, hey, look, this is the people that Jesus would have went after. Now, you know what I mean? If that person is still smoking a cigarette by the door 2 years later and she's still dressed like that, knowing what we're trying to accomplish later on down the road, then that's things that need to be addressed. But when we're trying to reach people are going to be people. And I feel like that's one of the things that Freedom Ministry tries to do, is we try to help regular church folk people and people that come from all different walks of life to be able to jump in the game and use the skills or the resources or whatever it is that they have to serve their community and shine the light.
Yeah. That's great.
And I'm happy, I know it.
This episode's Fishing for Goodies Fishbowl sponsor is Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center in Sulphur, Louisiana. I don't know what you look for when you travel, but one of the things I look for when I'm putting together my itinerary is a unique museum or gallery in the city I'm traveling to. I do this almost every time I go to a new city, but if I'm being honest, I'm guilty of not always doing that very thing right here at home in Sulphur, Louisiana. That's really a shame because we have one of the most interesting, historically relevant, and culturally rich corners in any city in the country about 2 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. I'm talking about the Brimstone Museum and Henning Cultural Center. Have you ever really thought about why our city is named Sulphur? They've got a permanent exhibit on the history of the sulfur industry that answers that simple question and more. You really get a full scope of just how important the sulfur mining industry was to the development of Southwest Louisiana and the impact it had on the rest of the world. Yes, the rest of the world. On the same property, right next door to the museum, is the Henning Cultural Center, presenting some of the most interesting, modern, and culturally relevant local art shows I've ever seen. My dear friend Tom Trahan and the Brimstone Historical Society have really worked hard to give us this treasure, and it's a multifaceted jewel that I plan to take advantage of more often. You don't have to wonder what their hours are, or how to get there, or what shows are coming up. Just go to brimstonemuseum.org like I did, and subscribe to their mailing list right there on the homepage. That's brimstonemuseum.org. Tom will make sure you start getting the announcements for each and every new show at the gallery. But you don't have to wait for the mail to arrive to enjoy this historical local treasure. You don't have to be guilty, like me, of overlooking a local wonder that conveniently sits next to the Grove, one of the most beautiful walking parks in Southwest Louisiana. Drop in and say hi to Tom for me. Tour the museum and center, and make sure to tell Tom that you heard about Brimstone Museum on Find the Good News. Now, let's take that dive in the fishbowl. So, man, what do you think about jumping in the fishbowl?
Man,
you ready for that?
I guess so. I feel like I've already been swimming.
Oh yeah, no. That's what's fun about this. I enjoy. I never know where it's going to go, and I love how it. I like that term you use, those rabbits. You know, I like going down those places and staying there for a little while and then coming back. You're really good at that. So you know the way this works. You draw three. There's three that you draw, and you can draw anything in there. Dig deep, get whatever you want.
And do I have to answer all three of them?
All three of them. We'll talk about all three. Some of them are little slips of paper, and there's cards in there too.
Well, you know, I can't just grab one off the top.
Nah, that's some people do, but I like to go deep in there, man. You get some good stuff out of there. Some of those are submitted by listeners, and some of them I put in, but some of them are also some cards that I use for some writing prompts.
And so I can pick which one I want to
do first. Yeah. All right, he's got three. I like this. You're reading them first. See, that's good.
Yeah, I'm a processor.
Yeah. Just make sure to see what you got yourself into, huh?
Oh, man, this one's not even fair. But I'll go with the lighthearted one first.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And in all fairness, I really, it is, would you rather explore space or the ocean? And that's, you know, in a way it's not fair because I'm a science fiction nerd, and I also enjoy, you know, watching Planet Earth.
Yeah.
On the that'll be one of the things if I finally part ways with Suddenlink that I'll be streaming some kind of way or picking up the documentaries. But I don't know. I'm gonna have to say space, just for the adventure, you know. Yeah. And you know, my dad was all about the Starship Enterprise, and I've watched you know, the Battlestar Galacticas and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And there's just intrigue about, you know, I'll just throw this out there. Some Christian people are funny about it, but I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's some other kind of life out there. Okay, yeah. I'll just put that out there. It'll aggravate somebody.
No, don't that's a good answer, man. That's a good answer.
If you want to email me, you can email me about anything but that.
I actually think that's fascinating because somebody else pulled this like way last year. At what are the odds, you know? But I think after thinking about that question myself a couple of times, I always think, well, space travel, like practical space travel, the way we do it now, it's pretty slow and boring. It seems like, it takes a lot of time. But if it's like the movies, it's like Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff, I think that would be fascinating. And I'm with you. I have no... It doesn't crash my glass box off the shelf to consider that in all of creation, that there are other living beings. I think that's actually makes it more beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it's the predator. You know what I mean? Like, but speaking of the predator, but if you don't believe that there could be a little frog creature swimming around on some kind of aquatic planet that has a decent atmosphere. Right. I mean, I just feel like, man, what kind of imagination does that person have?
Yeah, I mean, there's too much order in this whole big... I mean, just in our solar system, we find order. But I got to watch it because I can get off on this.
Yeah. Well, but for me, in a nutshell, it doesn't change who Jesus is for me. No matter if it would be Independence Day.
Right. Right. It doesn't break your theology. It doesn't break your faith. It does for some people, but not for me. I'm with you on that one. That's a good one. I'm glad you picked that. That was the lighthearted one you said.
Yeah, that's the lighthearted one. This one, there's one that... Oh, man. So this is the one where I fall victim to my own personality. Something on your to-do list that never gets done.
Oh.
Man, this is like I said, it's not really fair because I'm spread thin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Already.
Yeah, I'm already spread thin to begin with, but this is something that is going to get done in the next couple of months. But it's the repairing and working on my house.
Yeah.
And they say, that if you're a mechanic, which most of the time I call it the Barron Blitz, which I've learned from several of my friends that were married, that, okay, my wife's coming home, watch this. If I want to hang out with you, then we can clean your house together for an hour and get it respectable to where your wife would be like, oh, wow, he put forth some effort getting everything ready. And so I learned how to do the blitz.
Yeah.
So that at all times I try to keep my house no more than, apart from some dusting because I have 2 dogs and a cat, but not more than an hour and a half from a true scramble of being able to cook a meal for somebody or whatever. You know.
Presentable. Company can come over. You can cook a meal.
As long as they're not digging in my closets or whatever.
Right. You got to have the places to hide the riffraff. I get you.
Yeah, because I'm a pack rat, but that they'll say, that if you're a mechanic, that everybody else's car is running, but your exhaust leaking.
I've heard that for sure.
And I've known some mechanics, and it's the truth.
Carpenter's house is unfinished, all that stuff.
I'm glad that my spiritual house is okay, but my literal house is going to get some work done to it in the near future. But it's just about dedicating the time, and I don't. I'm not Bob Vila.
Right.
I'm somewhat skilled, but I'm not Bob Vila, and I want to have it done correctly, so
I understand that totally, man. I mean, where do I even start? There's so many for me. I'm the same way. I'm spread thin. I'm trying to learn to just do what's in front of me that needs to be done at the time it needs to be done, and then if I have to move on to something else, that's just the nature of what needs to be done, and there are going to be things that I can't get done, and that's very difficult. I understand it. It's hard.
It's in a perpetual state for me because I, when I was selling cars and I was completely bivocational, doing full-time ministry and full-time work, I still had structure. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then when I was on staff at church, I had structure of this is my time that I'm gonna be there. Now dealing with the people that I dealt with I was way outside of the parameters of those hours and stuff, and had to comp time and things of that nature. But right now, I have no idea what I have in theory what I'm going to be doing next week. Mm-hmm. But if a crisis situation arises, if I have to bring somebody to treatment, if I give my cousin Joe Williams, Craftsman, if I give him my word that I'm going to help him, then I'm going to help him. You know what I mean? And if he allows me to deal with a crisis situation, because he's in ministry as well, then possibly I can do that. But it's also like, if I've given my word, then I don't want to change out of that. And so while I've worked in the plants before as well on some turnarounds and things of that nature, but I would like to have a set schedule. I mean, I would function better.
No way,
Yeah, I might feel trapped.
You can plan for it.
After 6 to 9 months, I might feel like I'm doing time.
Sure, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would benefit from the normalcy of the rhythm.
Well, then you know that there's little containers for these things that you care deeply about. You can put them in. Like I get that, because even with this show, like I'll give you an example. When we first started out, it was brand new, and I would do interviews whatever day. And I was like, man, this is after a while, at first it's exciting, but then it's like, man, it's kind of havoc. I'm playing havoc with my schedule, because then I may have a guest that can come in on a certain day, but now that day is no good for me, and I might miss that guest, and I really want to have them come in. I had to come up with a plan for that, because it was just chaos, and I realized it was causing chaos in my life, and so a good thing was turning into a bad thing. So I said, well, okay, I'm just going to set dates that I can record. And if I can't get a person in on these dates, then I'll just eventually, if you give something enough time, that person will sync up with that schedule, if it makes any sense. And well, maybe you can't come this week, but hey, you can come a month from now. And if I keep that schedule, that revolution will eventually catch them on a day that they can. That made more sense to me. I had to give up the idea that I needed to get them in right now, like that eagerness. Did you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, trust me.
Yeah, it was one of those kind of things. So I mean, took a little bit. I'm like you. I'm like, hey, I've got so much going on. I got so many different projects in the fire. I want to get them all, keep them all moving. But I realized I need to let some of that go and loosen my grip a little bit and say, okay, they'll come. They'll get them in. They'll get in whenever it can happen naturally, versus me trying to shove something into a space that didn't work.
And that's the largest difference about being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
To say, for example, I try to honor the Sabbath. That's one of the things. And what I mean by that is taking a legitimate day off.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Once a week to, now if I have to, take my dogs to the park and do my laundry and whatever else, but I'm not taking calls, and I'm not dealing with stress, and I'm not dealing with anxiety, but I still cut my grass and whatever else. That's still a day off for me. You know what I mean? I don't need to go to Six Flags to call it a day off.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Shut down from all the...
But if I deal with 3 crisis situations in a row on my day off, then I've probably got manipulated in there somewhere. I'm probably just switching back into being a workaholic.
Yeah, I get that.
And taking it back.
Doer. I'm a doer. Yeah, I'm the same way. I find that too. I have to have a legitimate day, or even 2 days sometimes, where I'm just not. For me, a day off is not being connected to email, because email is such a driver with how projects come into our life. For me, I have to unplug from that. I can social media, I can take it or leave it and plug in. That's a choice. Email's a tether.
Yeah,
it's totally different, So
I'm actually I'm working on dealing with my screen time and dropping Suddenlink and some other things, just because I want to get back to sharpening my sword, and studying and reading, and possibly do some more writing projects and just focus more,
I understand that. I've been kind of doing the same thing. People wouldn't believe that, considering how much we post. I think it's probably seems excessive because that's what we do for a living, but a lot of it makes it, we can actually end up posting a larger quantity of things because we're so used to it and can generate that stuff quickly. So for us, what may seem like excessive to somebody else, it's not as excessive for us, because I got other people here who can help me.
Yeah, plus I'm learning all those perks that you can set
Yeah, right.
You can
Pre-schedule
set your posts that are going to appear on your Facebook and go home and
Right.
do whatever.
Exactly. And you can still interact with people through whatever comments come in without having to, be on top of a screen. Yeah, perfect. That's a good question, man. I like that one.
Yeah, it was tough because I would like to believe that I'm a little bit more organized than I am. I confess that in our circle of trust, but it doesn't mean that I'm not aware of it.
Right,
it just means that I
right.
haven't executed it.
Something you're wrestling with. That's one of the things. I get you. Yeah.
So this one here is gonna be. It's good that I pulled this one.
Yeah.
Because this is the absolute truth, and this is like I didn't know if I was gonna mention some of those things earlier when I was reflecting on this meeting, but it says, what do you consider your greatest achievement? And
that's a big question.
Yeah, well, it's being reunited with my daughter.
I knew it.
I mean, I can tell you there's no other thing in the whole wide world that has brought me that much joy. You know what I mean? And she's her own person. She's strong-willed, creative, writes poems, plays music, going to school at LSU to be a music teacher. Like she already figured out at 20 years old that I want to teach. And I don't just want to perform and try to, connect with an audience.
She wants to go that one-on-one.
She wants to pour back into people.
That's beautiful.
I'm like, wow, you're so far ahead of the curve.
What does that got to feel like, man? I mean, I know. I don't know. I don't even know how to frame what I'm about to say, but like to have not. I mean, God, it's gonna sound terrible. So just let me say it the way I'm gonna say it, and whether it's right or wrong, we'll have to deal with the repercussions. To have not raised
that's right
a child, but to now experience the adult version of that child as just a human being.
It's a paradigm, and it's difficult. It's difficult in a sense that maybe there are some of these values or some of the things that this modern version of me ways I would go about doing things.
Yeah.
Because what the Bible says is you train a child in the way that it should go, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. It doesn't mean that they're not going to have hardships. It doesn't mean that they're not going to, so this is backwards for me.
Yeah.
But the thing is I surrendered her spiritually, in 2005, and God gave her back to me in 2017. And so now I chose, that I'm not going to try to be dad. I'm not going to try to be Pastor Sean. I'm not going to try to be anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get to know her, and I'm going to extend my hand, as a friend and as a covering.
Yeah.
In the event that she will, and she's growing to trust me more and more. And I'm trying to, demonstrate consistency.
Yeah.
Which it's all in God's timing. When you are truthfully surrendered to His will, anyway, it is in His time.
Yeah. Wow, man. So that's I guess I didn't ask that the wrong way.
No. It's nothing, because that that question is what. Because looking at it like, okay, I would go to prison, I would go to 5th Ward Houston to buy my narcotics. I was scared of absolutely nothing. And this was the one thing that made me feel, like I wasn't a man, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And that my choices hurt other human beings.
Yeah.
But she was nurtured in an environment in which I couldn't provide.
Yeah.
And I had to just release it.
Yeah.
None of it was easy at all.
Yeah, that's incredible. It really is. I mean, I'm happy for you too, and for her.
Yeah, and her mother went on quite a journey as well.
Oh, I didn't ask about her.
Yeah, she's doing amazing things as well.
That's great. It really is. It's funny because earlier in our conversation that popped in my head. I was like, I wonder. I didn't want to ask, and go down a path that maybe was for whatever reason painful or something that sometimes if you don't divulge something, there's a reason for it. But I'm glad to hear that. Actually, that's a good piece of that story.
It is, and we're more than cordial. She's what I'm saying is we pull for each other in life. She's married and has her own business in Lake Charles and doing well, and I'm cheering for him, and I'm glad.
That's good, man. You do have one more question, but it's not from the fishbowl. It's actually on the back side of that yellow mug right there that now belongs to you since you have been on Find the Good News. Have you seen these before?
Mm-mm.
No, okay. Everybody gets one.
Did anything good happen today?
Yeah. Do you know where that I'll tell you where it comes from. When I started this show, and it kind of was birthed out of that question, I would go home, and many of us do this. We go home to our families or whoever we go home to, or anybody, when we say, so what happened today? How was school today? Or how was work today? Well, that's an open-ended question, You go home, and a lot of times in this world, there's so much negativity that you can tend to go, oh, well, my teacher gave me homework and griped about this, and we didn't get recess, and they had something I didn't like for lunch. And so instead of hearing about the actual day, all we hear about is the negative things. And I realized this was happening more and more, and I was doing it too. And I thought, well, what could I just change one little word in that question and just say, hey, did anything good happen today? And it totally reframes the day. And then using that as a way to not slide off, No, we won't acknowledge the reality of that bad things happen, but when we dwell in it all the time, man, it can change our brains. So I was like, well, let's just do this at home with the kids after school and say, hey, did anything good happen today? And they go, huh. And you'd see it on their face. They go, let me think about that. And it became like this exercise.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I put it on the back of the mug. So
yeah,
I try to ask every guest that last question.
Well, I woke up. I'm breathing. I had a positive attitude. I didn't eat as much as I normally would because I was nervous.
Yeah.
About coming here. I'll probably divulge a little bit more than I should when I leave out of here. But no, I enjoyed this, and
good, man.
I enjoyed talking about everything from Jesus to the Beastie Boys. I thought it was an interesting conversation.
I did too.
A nice little ride all the way around the world, and that's also a scripture from Philippians. Think about these things that are good, that are noteworthy. Philippians 4, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's good. I need to look that up. I'd like to have that in here.
Yeah, I'll help you out.
Yeah, that's good. I didn't realize that. That'd be great to have in here. Scripture is a powerful thing. I think, we talk about it a lot here. The Bible's a beautiful thing, and so many people have been beat over the head with it that they haven't opened it to find and let it speak to them, And it always makes me kind of sad. I'm not gonna lie, man.
And that's what we try to do, man. At Freedom Ministry of the South is try to love people. And before the younger, like you were saying, the younger me, man, that dude, I can't even explain him. But you can't. I can't do this with a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
And I can't worry about if somebody wants a long hair pastor to come speak at their church, or they would believe that they can learn anything from me, or that I would be willing to culturally accept them for the sake of creating a ministry in their church, which would be a safe place where people could, going through divorce, going through grief, going through addiction, going through the trials of life, and actually to even be delivered from religious condemnation and judgment.
Yeah.
which is ironically, what I'm doing now.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I had a giant chip on my shoulder, before all of this.
Yeah, I'd love to. I agree. I've been there, totally been there. So, if people want to, I know you told at the beginning, but I always like to close with that information. If people want to find you, connect with your ministry, or even if they want to get copies of your book, which we actually didn't mention the title of your book.
Okay, it's
Finish Your Milk and Don't Drink the Kool-Aid.
Exactly. And the Kool-Aid is some of the things that we've been discussing, which is believing that you can't love anybody besides the people who behave like you, and to think outside of the box, and the Bible says, like infant babies crave milk, that you should mature in such things, and not just stay there. And if you're the listeners, you can think about what that really means, because back when that was written, there was no formulas, there was no bottles. So to tell someone to finish the milk means that they should grow up and mature.
Yeah,
it was
like
almost
that.
In a sarcastic way, if you consider the time frame of when that was written.
Right.
What he's really truthfully saying. And so that's what I'm saying, is that as believers and as human beings, that we need to be able to love each other and be challenged in that, and not conform to what the world says we are in any kind of connotation. But okay, so Freedom Ministry of the South, we're on Facebook, and then we have a group that you can join on Facebook if you want to. You don't have to write anything if you join, but other people post scriptures, encouraging things, and if you have a prayer request, you can post it on that group. And we have people from all around Southwest Louisiana, some people from Mexico, and other people that have that have moved from the area that were part of the group. So there's people growing all over the place. And then the website is freedom337.org. And from there you can find information about everything. We have a community garden. I didn't mention much about that. When we partner with the probation office, we help people that need to get their paper signed, that need to accumulate the community service. And I believe, and I know you probably do too, in the holistic approach to healing, which you have to jump in there and interact with other humans, and through the relationship that people can experience life change.
Yeah.
The book, which this is hilarious because I said I would never do this, which is create a blog site, because I laughed and made fun of other people that had blogs. When I was a missionary, I kept a blog because I thought it was relevant to sharing my experiences and what God was doing, and people that were putting sowing money financially into it. They needed to know about the fruit and the good things that were happening. But so now I've created a blog site, and from up until this point, I put very little effort besides a Facebook page into getting the word out there about the book that I wrote. And it took over 10 years, and I wrote that book in the middle of all these circumstances that we're talking about.
Wow.
There's not a lot about the reunion with my daughter, because that was private, and I wanted to make sure that was all right with her, so I didn't disclose too much about that. But all the rest of the journey, and the struggles, and the grief, and the depression, and all those battles, and verses that can help you overcome those things, and that's all in the book.
That's great.
And so I created a blog site against my own better judgment called finishyourmilk.org, and so before the week is over, you'll be able to download it on ebook format.
Oh, great. And so we'll get a link to that and put it in the show notes.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we'll put links to everything in there.
And then there's links in the blog site just saying who I am and what I'm doing, that'll take you to the Facebook, that'll take you to the Freedom website.
And it's finishyourmilk.org.
Yep.
Excellent, man. Well, I do appreciate you coming today, man. This has been a good conversation for me.
Man, thank you. And it was good laughs and good reminiscing as well.
Oh, I agree.
Because people that grew up in this area, they remember those times, man.
They do. I'm surprised by how many people, when they realize, and maybe even more so now through this show, they go, oh, those videos, and the movies and the video games and the baseball cards, that brings back a lot of memories because it captures just like a specific time in our history here in this little town.
Yeah, and and finding somebody with a driver's license to bring you to Shepherd's Rest.
Yes, right. Oh man, the swing at Shepherd's Rest. I got kicked off one time. I went on a church retreat there, and I was walking across that little platform, and another kid come swinging, and kicked me right in the water. I didn't know up from down, that old green water they had in that thing.
Yeah, and you jump out when a snake comes.
Yes,
when a snake came out that drainage pipe, everybody evacuated.
Oh man, wild time.
I love you just as well.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Pastor Sean Barron. If you enjoyed our visit, you can help me share more like it by becoming an early riser patron at patreon.com/findthegoodnews. Share this episode with someone you care about, or leave a kind review. Thank you for your support and for pressing play.